Natural Infrastructure and Growth Scrutiny panel today. Before we start, I have to go through the usual housekeeping, so please bear with me. We have no expected fire alarms today, so should the alarm sound, please exit the room. I think you know the drill, follow the crowd, and the assembly point is outside the front door. Can I ask that you use your microphone whenever you're addressing anyone in the room, and please remember to turn it off, and also if you can ensure your mobile phone is on silent, you are acutely aware that this matter is being broadcast live via the internet, of which there are thousands of people watching. Good afternoon, viewers. But it will be capable of subsequent reviewing or repeat viewing, and by entering this room and during the course of the meeting, you are consenting to being filmed and the use of those recordings for webcasting. So thank you very much. Hannah, apologies, please.
Thank you, Chair. We've received apologies from Councillor Sarah Allen, and we've got Councillor Will Noble substituting today. We've also received apologies from Councillor Holloway.
Thank you. I noticed Councillor Holloway is normally Vice Chair. I'm proposing just to continue without Vice Chair. I'll run the list of speakers. Am I required to have one? Excellent. All right, brilliant. Any declarations of interest that we need to be made aware of? Thank you.
Yes, I've got a few declarations of interest, actually, Chair. I'll just pull up the list, unfortunately, because we're talking about climate. There's quite a few. Lewis P Foundation, United Nations Environment Programme, Blue Marine Ocean Conservation Trust, the Government of Chile, the US Government, and Ocean OS. I also have to raise the Plymouth Waterfront Partnership because I believe they will probably come into conversation in the later piece around brand for the city.
Sorry, so through you, Chair, what type of interest are you declaring? Sorry, I understand.
So there are all organisations that I've directly worked on climate for in the last 5 years. And
but not current?
Some are current.
Some are current, okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any more? Super. Thank you very much. That takes us to item number 3, minutes. I assume you've had the opportunity to read the minutes. Any corrections, amendments, omissions? If I can have your agreement that these reflect the last meeting, I will sign those after the meeting. Thank you very much. Chair's urgent business. I haven't been appraised of any. Excellent. And that takes us straight into the agenda items. So ordinarily you'd try and catch the Vice Chair's attention to get on the list as a speaker, so I'll keep my eye, and if you raise your hand, I'll record you. So, who have we got for agenda item number 5? Well, I see Councillor Creswell, so perhaps if you could introduce, and we move along the table so everybody watching at home and here in the room knows who people are, and then we'll go back to you, Sally, because I assume you're going to introduce the item. Thank you.
So I'm Councillor Sally Creswell. I'm a Cabinet Member for Education, Skills and Apprenticeships, and then we'll go along and introduce everyone.
Hello, I'm Tina Brinkworth. I'm Head of Skills and Post 16 at Plymouth City Council.
Yeah, good afternoon everyone. Tom Lavis. I'm the CEO of YMCA Plymouth and Discovery College, and I sit on the board of the Devon and Plymouth Chamber of Commerce and the Plymouth Area Business Council.
Good afternoon, I'm Toby Hall. I'm the Funding Partnerships Manager in the Skills and Post 16 team.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Darcy. Could I say a big thank you to start with, because I'm actually going to be at the Plymouth Apprentice of the Year Awards just later on this afternoon, and you actually organised the agenda so that I was able to present our item first, which is really, really helpful, really kind of you to organise that. And especially as it's actually the 10th year anniversary of building Plymouth, and of course very relevant to the very things that we are actually talking about this afternoon. So thank you again, it's much appreciated. So this paper reviews our current Skills for Plymouth plan, the progress that's been made across a number of measures since its development in 2020-2021, and the need now is for a refresh and update to this plan. And that's particularly so given the major new opportunities and changes for the city, which has been brought about by the Ministry of Defence, MOD investment, in His Majesty's Naval Base at Devonport Dockyard. Significant progress has been made in addressing skills challenges since the publication of Skills for Plymouth 2021-2026. Across the city, we've seen a reduction in the number of neat young people. That's not in education, employment and training, although we have been changing the language somewhat and using the term seeking education, employment and training. A significant increase in the numbers of our special educational needs and disabled, our SEND young people in employment and training, and an increase from 72% in January 2023 to 90.4% in December 2024, which is really fabulous. We've also seen gaps begin to close in attainment rates at both GCSE and A-level, with Plymouth achievements getting closer to the national average, which is really very encouraging. This is a good trajectory to be on, and one that we need to make sure that we continue to pursue and not to get complacent, but it's certainly positive. Plymouth has also seen improvements in unemployment, with now lower than the national average by approximately 1%. In addition to these improvements, we have also seen the continued growth and impact of Skills Launchpad Plymouth and also On Course Southwest. Skills Launchpad Plymouth now have supported almost 1,000 young people and over 900 adults furthest from the labour market, with almost 500 having entered employment and over 350 into training. On Course Southwest supported over 5,000 adults and young people within 2023-2024, helping 67 to further study or employment and 100% pass rate in GCSEs across maths, English and science. However, we now need to look at refreshing the Skills for Plymouth plan to ensure it incorporates and aligns with the latest developments, including the new Plymouth economic strategy, the MOD investment and the formation of the Growth Alliance Plymouth, and the announcement of Connect to the Work programme. We will work closely with partners and the Employment and Skills Board on this refresh. And so that's the basis on which I present this paper, and that I'm going to pass off to Tina, who I think is going to show us some slides.
Thank you. I've just got a couple of slides really, just to step through and just put some key highlights. Could we have the next slide, please? So Skills and Plymouth Plan was issued in 2021-2026 in 2021. It was our plan to 2026, but we're taking the opportunity now to do a light touch refresh. And just to remind everyone, you know, we set out this plan, and this plan has been delegated to the Employment and Skills Board, which aligns to the Growth Board. And it's really to ensure people have the right skills they need now and in the future to access employment and to progress their careers, to ensure our employers and individuals invest in skills and lifelong learning, and employers have the right skills they need to grow and scale up their businesses. Next slide, please. And when we're refreshing the board, we will work closely with the Plymouth Employment and Skills Board to refresh these priorities. And this is the Plymouth Employment and Skills Board is made up of many organisations. So we have businesses represented, we have employer representative groups like the Federation for Small Business, the Devon Cornwall Training Provider Network, the Devon Chamber. We also have members from HE and FE, so City College Plymouth, or Discovery College, which Tom's here today, or 3 universities, Arch University, Marshall's University and City College Plymouth. And we have aligned the Employment and Skills Board to sit underneath the Growth Board, so we've got really good alignment. And then regionally we aligned to the LSIP, which is the Local Skills Improvement Plan. Next slide, please. So we do know from labour market analysis that there will be 15,000 new jobs in the city over the next 10 years. And this will impact on all of our sectors, but some more than others, particularly construction, particularly engineering. And we also know that today we have 7,000 unique vacancies advertised on a monthly basis, and that's been a growing trajectory. So, you know, it's gone pre-COVID, it was about 350, post-COVID it went up to about 1,200, and we've seen month-on-month increase. So what we're not necessarily doing is closing those job vacancies, but we're seeing a lot of movement across businesses as people move and transition across organisations. Next slide. We have, so progress, Councillor Cresswell has already mentioned some of these, but we have, since we've issued the plan, and the plan sets out a number of interventions, and we're working very much in a model of demand, supply and pipeline, where demand is the business needs, supply is our education providers, and then the pipeline is the future generations coming through the system. We are closing and getting close to the England average on both GCSE and A-level attainment rates, so we have made significant progress. We have seen a reduction in our young people not in employment, education and training. We've actually rephrased our language, and we've changed our language to young people seeking employment, education and training. 18 months ago, we had about 1 in 10 of our young people were not in employment, education and training. Today, that's 1 in 20. So we have made significant impact. And we've also working across particular cohorts. For example, where SEND young people, we've moved from that 72% EAT status, employment, education and training status in January 23 to 90.4% today for our SEND cohort. So we have closed the gap. We recognise there's still more work to do with our care leavers and young carers and those in the criminal justice system. But we have a programme in place, and we're working really hard to put interventions and support in place. Skills Launchpad, you know, again, we're supporting nearly 2,000 people have come through the front door of Skills Launchpad. Almost 500 of those now have entered into paid employment. Previously, they were not employed. And 350 have entered into training programmes on a pathway to employment. I'm going to hand across now to Tom from Discovery College to talk around the Discovery College.
And good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for having me. So Discovery College has been working or aligned very closely with Encore South West, PCC's educational delivery arm, as part of the Plymouth Education Partnership Alliance. And for us, it's been a really interesting journey, because right from the outset a few years ago, where we're saying the NEET demographic in Plymouth, seats now, was obviously above national averages, and what could YMCA Discovery College do with that? So we've been working very closely and aligning on that. For those who don't know Discovery College, because I appreciate as a charity, we don't have a huge marketing budget to promote who we are on the side of a bus, but we work with 16 to 19-year-old young people who have fallen out of the educational system for one reason or another. That could be anything to do with kind of domestic issues, drug, alcohol kind of addictions, those type of things, and just giving them that opportunity to stepping stone back into some form of education, with hopefully moving on to a level 2, a level 3, and progressing on from there. We really pride ourselves in that particular target audience, and probably more recently we've started to move across into, with support from Encore South West and Plymouth City Council, the SEN kind of the audience that are the most furthest from employment. And last year we piloted, as part of that, the supported internship programme, which the best way I can describe for those who don't know is very much like an apprenticeship, but it's working with young people with SEN needs. And like I say, again, it's a huge spectrum. So we ran a pilot at the YMCA Discovery College, working alongside the China Fleet Club and Plymouth Active Leisure, the Life Centre, predominantly in sport and recreation, trying to give these young people opportunities in really mainstream recreational facilities, but they just need a little bit more help, a little bit more one-to-one, a little bit more guidance. And if I forgot the time, very quickly tell you about one young man who came to us, massive anxiety around groups of people, large buildings, that type of thing. 3 months later, we managed to get him a placement at the Life Centre. He was working very closely with one of our tutors, and also with one of the supervisors at the Life Centre. I can now tell you at this point, he is now full-time recruited by Plymouth Active Leisure. I was sharing a story with Toby in reception not that long ago, because I spoke to Reece, who's the CEO at the Life Centre, and he said he's the young man that every morning I don't have to tell him what to do. He knows his jobs, he turns up bang on time, works his way through his job list, never have to follow up, never have to worry about is it being done, just meticulous to detail. The only difference was you just needed a little bit of time to get there. And I think working together with the likes of Tina, On Course, PCC, it's been a really successful pilot. This year we've now expanded the supported internships, moving into more tourism and hospitality. As I mentioned, I'm in the Chamber of Commerce. All I hear is about the recruitment shortage in those particular industries. So we've now opened up our courses to that. And this afternoon, straight after this, I'm heading off because I've got another meeting around supported internships regarding landscaping. And those who are on the spectrum, being outdoors and being physically engaged is something that's really, really positively received. So we're feeling like we can help with that as well. So it's been a really interesting time. Just quickly on the next slide, if that's okay. Have I got any left? I think I have, haven't I? Oh, I've kind of covered it. Sorry, that's typical me. My apologies. Thank you. Open to any questions if that helps. But based in Honnicknell, opposite All Saints Academy. If anyone would like to come and visit, you'd be most welcome. Yeah, you'd be most welcome anytime.
That's great. Thank you. Toby, did you wish to contribute?
I think probably just to add on to the end that as you'll see at the sort of the end of the report, obviously we're interested in sort of aligning around with organisations like Discovery College around that future Skills for Plymouth plan and how we can really incorporate that as a sort of citywide response. So I think that's all to add is Tom's here as an example of a brilliant provider that we want to sort of engage and make sure we can align within that Skills for Plymouth plan refresh.
Members, over to you. Thank you so much for those presentations. Hopefully we'll have a bit of a Q&A and we will put those to you. So, Councillor Rainsford is always very keen and I'm grateful for it. Thank you, Alison.
Chair, I've got two short questions, if I may take a liberty. First one's actually about the role of the Skills Board and how you decide the priorities, because the demand in the city for different skills changes. There are some core skills that we know we're going to need on ongoing. How adaptable and flexible is that 3-year plan to, say, for example, confirmation that we're definitely going to build 5,000 new homes somewhere in the city. But at the moment, that's not necessarily a total given. Are you planning already for that sort of development?
Yeah, thank you. So we use a combination of data and information from modelling, but we also use that local business knowledge as well. So we bring those two data sources together to really build our intelligence. We're already planning, we understand that construction pipeline. Toby has modelled that construction pipeline we use and we link it back into the ONS data. And we already and we share that information at the Employment and Skills Board, but equally we also share it with our providers for them to look to create the courses to align. So we have at least timely meetings with our providers to share that information, and then for more strategic partners, key partners, we also meet on a monthly basis. So for example, for City College Plymouth, we're having a monthly conversation around the skills demands. So it's an iterative process and it will change and flex as required.
Thank you. That's what I wanted to hear. I just want to be sure there was a sort of rolling programme. Second question is a very quick one. The last page talks about timelines and consultation. Listed in the sort of people who might be involved, the usual suspects, if I can call them that. Do you consult with 15, 16-year-olds who might be prospective clients?
So we will embed the voice of the young people into our process. We do have a SEND employment forum which has got a subgroup. We will connect into the Youth for SEND young people and the participation groups as well. So we'll absolutely make sure that we're feeding the voice of the young people back in. We've also got under our programme a schools programme, which we also deliver significant outreach, which is our pipeline element. So that's building the future pipeline and sharing all of those careers advice and guidance with schools and with young people. So, you know, I'm a great believer you cannot be what you cannot see. So you have to get into the schools and shape what the future jobs are going to look like, so we can inspire the next generation and raise those aspirations.
Thank you. Councillor McLean.
Thank you, Chair. I'm also going to follow up with a cheeky request for 2 questions, if that's okay. My first question, I think, is probably going to be for Tina. Thank you all for your presentation. Building on that point that you made about being what you can see, some of the jobs that we've listed, construction workers, engineers, sometimes fall into quite traditional roles, and I'm wondering how we can break down expectations of who can go into those jobs. Think about women, people with SEND requirements.
Yeah, thank you. So I think when we're looking at running out, so first of all, I'm going to say I'm a female engineer. So, you know, and so that's why I'm a great believer. You cannot be what you cannot see. And so when we're looking at our schools programs, we're making sure we've got a really diverse representative, and our schools program is a citywide program. So we're liaising with Babcock, Princess Yachts, you know, the NHS. It's getting all of your employers. So we can do that. And then we've also got some key strategic events where we've aligned our calendar. So Skills Launchpad Live is a typical example where the Discovery College run on behalf of us. It's becoming an annual event, which is the largest showcase of careers across the Southwest, and we just make sure we've got that really diverse representatives. We've got mentoring programs running alongside, so we're making sure we've got a really good mix of diverse mentors into those schemes. And you know, with them today, we've got the apprenticeship of the year. So we've got these key strategic events happening across the city, which happen on an annual basis. We've got the activities which go into school assemblies, which are led from employers, which we're all mapping, and we're all driving in a really coordinated approach. And then we've got mentoring programs to support as well. And it's not a PCC thing; it's a citywide thing. We all own this, and we're all building that talent pipeline of the future. And diversity is in the mix of that, absolutely.
Just to add, the Women in STEM event,
Yeah.
I think that's so important.
Yeah.
It's again, it's another annual event.
Yeah.
Fortunately for the YMCA, we have great connections, not only with the industry, because commercials support charities very well, but from the college perspective, we're very integrated in all the schools in the city. So when you run an event, we have all the networks to make it work. Women in STEM is brilliant.
Also, can I just add something to that? Is that it's actually, we're thinking probably of older young people, but actually it's really important to get some of that into primary schools. So certainly when I was working in primary school, we would have Babcock who would come in, and other employers who would do all kinds of very often they were engineering, problem solving things with children in years 4, 5 and 6, and it's really important to actually be attuned and start to be thinking about some of those things. Because some young people will be exposed all the time, you know, they might have parents who are engineers or whatever, but other young people won't necessarily see those sorts of things going on and see those possibilities of what they can possibly be. And I'm just going to give a little plug here, and I don't know if it's appropriate, but for CNR schools, because under the National Marine Park, we have this fantastic opportunity with our schools, which is a 4-year plan in our primary schools of doing work with some of our schools in some of our more deprived areas, of those young people going to not just to the aquarium, but actually engaging over a 4-year period with all sorts of aspects of the National Marine Park. And there are so many jobs and opportunities and things there. So it's not just about their immediate learning, but it's also about that exposure of thinking, gosh, that's something I could actually do, or I could actually be.
Thank you. Tom, I have to admit, I hadn't heard of Discovery College before, and the work you're doing sounds absolutely fantastic. I love hearing those personal stories as well. You mentioned that you don't have the money for like big bus stop ads to advertise your work, and I'm just wondering, on the back of that, how do people hear about your work? Are your courses full? Are people referred into you? Do you do outreach?
Yeah, thank you, Lauren. I mean, in its entirety, all of those. as best as we can with the limited resources we have. A lot of our young people are referred. So marketing would be great from a branding perspective and people hearing about us. But most of the young people we're trying to target are already in the system in one guise or another. So we do get some walk-ins, but they're more infrequent. Most people get directed our way because of the nature of the work we do. But you're right, you wouldn't see us on the side of a bus as a result. And I don't think that would be a good, wise investment of charitable money to do so when you'd rather spend it on giving them good quality provision. So yeah, marketing budget is minimal. But most of our young people would come through referrals, and that would be a combination of many things through, like Skills Launchpad, for example. I've already mentioned we've got great connections with the school because we are in the educational system. So those links probably prove more fruitful. And therefore, because of those relationships, you get transition time. So they may touch bases with us before they actually start. If you come and you have a look around, you'll see it's not a school. It's not a big shiny castle on the hill, which could be quite off-putting. It's a very friendly, welcoming place. There's no barriers or gates that make you feel you've got to scan a barcode to get in the door. So, yeah, we really try and think about that first impression, what may ease a young person's way into trying to reintegrate into education, because for whatever reason, up until that point, they haven't. Sorry, I hope that helps.
Thank you. Councillor Noble.
As we this week is National Apprenticeship Week, and today's theme is you can't be what you can't see, which you've mentioned already. Where do you think where do you think there's opportunity that isn't visible to people that, you know, where do you think there's opportunities for people to progress or develop into roles but isn't currently as visible as some of the other schemes that you've described there?
So we have got quite a large programme on this week, being in National Apprenticeship Week. We've in Skills Launchpad this week. Apparently, it was only standing room only with a number of young people in, and I know we've got the apprenticeship awards this week tonight as well, so which is fantastic. As a city, we have over 2,000 apprenticeship starts per year, so 16% of our school leavers and college leavers go into apprenticeship. That's compared to 10% nationally. So we do see apprenticeships are the early career opportunities for our city, for many of our young people. And our apprenticeship it's shifted as well. We've moved away from the level 2s, so we're now into the 3, 4s and 5s, which is fantastic. So those qualifications are coming up. We've got particularly a high demand in construction and engineering. There are a few vacancies which aren't filled every year, and that's predominantly because a lot of the apprenticeships do a traditional start date, an academic start date in September. But we do now have some providers moving to a roll-on, roll-off start date. So many of our construction workers will roll on throughout the year. On-Course Southwest, as you know, PCC have now become an apprenticeship provider. We achieved that status last year. We have a roll-on, roll-off apprenticeship. So we're seeing more flexibility in our providers, I think, which will help with a lot of that. We share the vacancies really broadly. We collect an apprenticeship bulletin, which is issued on a sort of bi-monthly basis. We share that information with schools, and we do see a significant uptake of apprenticeships in our city, and many of our young people see that as the first steps into, you know, really successful careers in STEM, particularly.
Don't know if you could add a bit more to this, Tina, as well, is that there's also I think an increasing demand as well, you know, looking at all ranges of training here, an increasing demand as well as far as degree apprenticeships is also, you know, is also a route as well, and becoming increasingly popular. I don't know if we can necessarily always keep up with that demand, though. That's an important aspect.
Yeah, and I think, you know, changes coming down around the apprenticeship levy will help with much of that as well. So we know there's some reforms going to be taking place, which will be really supportive. There'll be more flexibility around the apprenticeship levy, which will help employers and providers. If I was to say where is there a gap, probably in a supported apprenticeships. So supported apprenticeships are for our SEND young people. We did have only 9 send young people on supported apprenticeships. Our numbers have now significantly increased. We're about 50. So what we're working with is providers now to provide more of a supported apprenticeship offer. What does that mean? It means for a young person who send, you don't have to achieve your level 2 English and maths, but you could have that as a level 1 English and maths. So, and that's where we're, you know, if there's a gap, that's a gap, but we are growing that gap and the trajectories are growing upwards.
Councillor Bannerman.
Thank you, Chair. Tom, I also wanted to touch on the amazing work that you've been doing with young people, especially talking about the young gentleman that you got into employment, and hearing from the employer how valuable that person is, regardless of whether they've got said needs or not. Every person has a value in employment. And I know at the moment you're working with young people. Is there any scope to widen that? Unfortunately, historically, we've probably not had services like yourself. So there might be people my age that haven't had the opportunity to get into employment that have maybe missed out.
Firstly, hear you loud and clear. Totally agree with what you're saying. Naturally, at the YMCA and full community organisation that we are, but education at the moment, we are very much 16 to 19 years because that was the gap identified at the time. We've mentioned already in this room how quickly things can shift. And I know On-Course have already moved to bringing in apprenticeships into their team because that was previously not there before. So we are adapting as a Plymouth Education Partnership Alliance, but we're using our partnership to specialise in the areas they're best at delivering. So what I love about the partnership is it's not a one-size-fits-all in one place, because one place may not be suitable for an individual. That's my take on it. Sorry, Tina.
If I can just add, and I think as well, for 19 plus people, we have adult skills funding. So On-Course Southwest is our in-house provider of adult education. We have 5,000 plus people through our doors through On-Course Southwest. We're really proud of the work that we do to support those communities. And I'm just going to give you some statistics around On-Course Southwest. So, you know, 5,000 learners, 1 in 4 of our learners declare a learning disability. Our high needs learners have gone from the last year from 3.4% to 6.8%. So we're seeing a significant increase in our young people with an education and healthcare plan, which are 19 plus. 30% of our learners are from ethnic minorities. 60% of our learners are actually in deprived wards. In wards of deprivation, we deliver 70% of our, we're peripatetic, we deliver 70% of our courses in the community. So we're reaching into community spaces, and in December, from the previous year, our numbers of enrolment had already increased by double. So we're really becoming a really learner of choice. Our revenue from On-Course Southwest has grown significantly in recent years. We've accessed more skills funding, and we've got a really wide audience we're delivering to. So adult skills funding will support the adults as well. We're also really lucky that we're about to get, hopefully, into contract a Connect to Work. We've submitted our delivery plan for Connect to Work. We're hoping to be in contract shortly. Connect to Work will support 650 people into paid employment, and that's from vulnerable backgrounds. So that's you know, care experience, care leavers, young carers, those in the criminal justice system, homeless prevent, veterans. The categories are really broad. We will see that as a significant investment which has come into our city to support people into paid employment. We have job vacancies. We've got 7,000 vacancies. What we're going to have now is a significant investment, which will be for at least 3 years, potentially 5 years. It's a significant amount of money which will support people through work. And under the casework model, you can hold people for 12 months plus, because we know there's a significant amount of transition to support people to upskill them into paid employment. So it's good news. We've got some really good interventions coming down the system, which is really going to support us to bridge those gaps we have for our businesses today.
Sorry, Tina, just one last thing is we talked about the SEN, and I'm up to 19, but actually if they've got an EHCP plan, we can take them up to the age of 25. So we can take all those routes we were talking about for our 16, 19-year-olds all the way up to the age of 25.
Thank you. Councillor McCarthy.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. Great presentation. I love this premise of, you can be what you can see. And some of my questions have already been answered, actually. We obviously spend a lot of our time here in Plymouth looking at the SEA, the C. And I guess from that side, the employers you mentioned, Tina, when you were speaking, and then obviously Sally's described the programme with the National Marine Park is getting lots of young people engaged with the marine environment. Do we know stats on how many young people are going into apprenticeships and then into employment within the marine industries?
Probably I couldn't do that off. Oh, Toby could.
No, I don't think I can do it, but it's certainly something we could look at taking away. I mean, there are breakdowns of it. It'd be something I could produce certainly as a half page after this. I can see what I can pull out from the apprenticeship sort of achievement stats.
Thank you. That'd be really interesting. I don't think it's necessarily something that is critically urgent, but I think it's one of those things. We're going to be talking today about sort of Britain's Ocean City, and I know Tina's a true champion of the marine environment as a big swimmer herself. And we've had STEM Fest and lots of things that have been going on in the city for a long time. So it'd just be really interesting to see what the impact of those have been over the last sort of 10 to 15 years.
And also, I mean, I think impact is really important, and having that kind of like almost that baseline, because it would be really interesting to see what impact in terms of that awareness of jobs and jobs within that blue economy are impacted on looking perhaps a bit more long term, because we are looking long term at some of our what would be young people at the moment who are in their who at the end of primary school, beginning of secondary school, and the impact that has, and seeing those figures actually increase. Because if you only have to think about the fact that there are children at the moment who are in primary school and such who will be doing jobs which probably haven't actually been invented yet.
Just quickly with my Chamber of Commerce hat on. So if I go back 4 years ago, all I used to hear in meetings was blue-green economy. Blue-green economy was everywhere. And then there was like a blanket statement, well, everybody in the country is a green economy because we're going that way, sort of thing. And more recently, I'm hearing blue economy, blue economy. The Chamber are driving that massively, Freeport, the business that moving in there, and they are priming the businesses coming in to make sure they are focused and targeted on higher level apprenticeships, for example, around the blue economy. So I know from the business end, it's highly spoken about and it has been for some time. And I see that as being an area of growth personally.
Perfect, thank you. Thanks.
Thank you. Just leading on from your request for that information, I agree with you. It's not urgent, but it would be useful to have that. I wonder, not for you to do the task twice, is we look at apprenticeships generally and we look at by sector. So rather than just focusing on how many have gone into marine, could we have a look at apprenticeships more generally, but have and indicate which sector they go into? I think that might be useful if you agree. Yeah.
We have that data, so we can get that to you fairly easy. We just don't know the stats off the top of our head.
Why not? I expect you to carry all of that information around. I haven't got any more speakers, but I do have a rather observation and a broad question, which I hope to distill as I'm articulating it. So I will come to a point eventually. But thank you so much for the report. Really a great report, a great insight to see what's been going on, identifying the challenge or the opportunity that we have before us. So it's not a case of we've got too many people and not enough jobs. So we need to view this in a very positive light. And a lot of the questions that have come around have kind of touched off what I'd like to understand a bit better. Very much be what you can see, you're absolutely right. And I recognise through the council and other organisations the outreach work that goes on, particularly in primary schools. And I think that's where we were discussing it earlier in our meeting, is in light of the national need for more apprenticeships, the regional need, and certainly here in our city, which we're most interested in, and the competition, whilst I appreciate we're all on the same page and we're all trying to generate our future employees to service the opportunities in the city, but we can't not say it. If Babcock need X amount of workers and they can't find them here, well, guess what? Babcock will go elsewhere, pay them a lot more money to get them into the city, and then the residents of Plymouth are being deprived of that opportunity. So we all have objectives, but particularly the commercial operators, if they can't be satisfied here in terms of recruitment, they'll go elsewhere. Or, God forbid, companies will move their footprint to other regions. So it is a very real challenge. And in light of the way the education system is in this country, and particularly in Plymouth, we have a lot of academies. At a political level, Sally, and then perhaps Tina from the executive level, how much influence do we have in our education curriculum? So we know at secondary school level, we do an awful lot, and people have the opportunity to go into apprenticeships. But going back to the mantra of be what you can see, outreach work is great at primary level, but that's a day that they've had with somebody who's come in and told them what the great job they're doing, and it was fantastic. But they're going home to a house of bus drivers or nurses or doctors, and 2 days later they've forgotten about Jimmy, who came in to talk about an avenue into engineering apprenticeships. So rather than me labouring the point, is there scope, Sally, at a political level, and Tina at an executive level, to have more of an influence at that primary education curriculum where they start adopting some of what's going on at secondary level, so it's not such a shock to the system for the children when they move that transition between primary and secondary school, and their minds are not already closed to the opportunities that might be presented by way of an apprenticeship locally. So if you can perhaps respond to that observation and query, but it's twofold, political and executive.
I think it's a really, what you say is really interesting, because schools have, if you think of their drive, very often is of course for key stage 3, 4, 5, 5, and you have the situation in which sort of teachers have that sort of pressure, if you like, on them. But at the same time, there have been, I think, some really quite good initiatives, and you'll probably be able to speak a little bit more about them, of working increasingly, and that's why it's important that that industry, employers, that staff in schools actually are aware, for example, of the range of employers that exist within the city, so that you are able to build up that sort of experience, wider experience, and teachers aren't just, if you like, sort of focused on thinking, that those highly academic children, making sure you get them off, they go off to university, because some young people are opting very much for going down the road of degree apprenticeships. And if I give an example of a conversation I had with a young person whose sister gone to a very academic school. His sister had gone through the natural academic route. She was really interested in engineering, and due to the fact that there was some good liaison and some good work sort of going on with her school, and also with links with industry and whatever, she actually opted for the route, and she could have gone to a good university, but decided that she was going to opt for the route of going down through a degree apprenticeship. And I think there's probably, and I think looking at some of the government legislation that is coming through, there is an acknowledgement that we need to perhaps be looking in that sort of broader way, if you like, for young people, thinking just in terms of sending them through the school system, through the GCSEs, A-levels, and then on to university, that we need to be sort of creative and wider. And I think one of the things the government's looking at is having these colleges which are going to be, colleges which are going to be those that are going to be examples of some of the sort of perhaps a more flexible, I think a more sort of flexible approach, and we don't have that rigid academic versus going into an apprenticeship approach. But I think that requires, and we have seen some of that, I think that requires, and we've got some good partnerships and such that are working and going on. And I think that building on those partnerships is going to be really important, especially as, we go into, the world as it's going to be and it evolves for these young people.
So just to follow on, our outreach programmes into schools particularly focuses on year 5, 6, 7 and 8. Those are the critical year groups for us because actually we're reaching young people before they select their options. So when you select your options and you're not taking STEM qualifications, you could be closing the doors to, really, great careers in our city. So, what we're really encouraging young people to do is to take your sciences, to take your engineering, to opt for your DT, to opt for those creative arts courses and qualifications which are going to help you to secure a job going forward in our city. So that's a significant amount of our outreach. I do think there's more room in our city for vocational qualifications at schools. If you look at the UTC's approach around engineering, that UTC feeds straight into engineering job roles. We've got Scott Medical School, which feeds into the medical school as well. So I think there is more scope for that. We have little influence because of their multi-academy trust, but we do help to inform and shape where we can that curriculum. But there's not a lot of, there's not much control there, but we can help to inform. So, we definitely do our part in that. And also Careers Southwest, which was we used to commission to do our careers advice and guidance. That organisation is closing down. Those staff are trooping back in-house into PCC, and they're coming back into my team. So we'll be able to connect this up in a more systemic way to be able to really get out and really embed that outreach and all of these careers back into schools. They're in contact with young people. And we'll really be able to do that in a more strategic way and approach as well, which will really align and that will align to the future needs of our city, and that will be a key enabler.
Mine's quick, short. It's a simple stat you can take away. £110,000 is the swing between taking a traditional degree route and an apprenticeship degree route. You can end up 50 to 60k in debt when you do a traditional degree route. Or you can do the degree apprenticeship route with a great employer and a guaranteed job at the end, and you get paid along the way and they pay you a university fee. Be a young person from a disenfranchised background whose parents never went to university and can't afford to send you £110,000. And that's an average. Thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted to close with something which is quite interesting and innovative that I was looking at in Manchester, and there's the Manchester Baccalaureate, which is actually something which is shaped specifically for the needs of Manchester. And so you have within there, obviously there's the key skills of maths, science and maths, science and English. But you've also got that IT element, so it's different to the National Baccalaureate. You've got the IT element and media, because of course they have Salford and they have like effectively Media City. Interesting to see about shaping something like that, which would be specifically, if you like, particularly for Plymouth, looking at sort of those green, those blue, the blue economy, and how you could shape something which would be tailor-made, in fact, to Plymouth, and making sure that we're keeping those young people actually in our city, and we're not losing them to other places.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's the point that I think, Josh, you were alluding to. But I think it's really encouraging to hear that. But it is an opportunity to get that pipeline to start that process even earlier. So, and I think we should be using our influence to try and influence that curriculum at a much earlier age. But it sounds like you guys are doing that. For you, sorry, Councillor Sportson. Yeah, final word.
Thank you, Chair. It's just a quick one. I just wanted to say thank you to the panel, and Tom graciously stated that the YMCA was open for us to visit. I just wanted to ensure that we could have his contact details maybe sent to the panel, if that's something we could know, please.
Good point. Well, to all of you, Tom, thank you so much. It's been really informative. I'm one who knew very little about what was going on at Discovery College, so I'm really grateful. The committee are much more informed. Toby, Tina, thank you so much for a very good report. Sally, thank you so much for your presentation. You are free to go. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon.
Thank you, they're a fabulous team.
Committee, we are being asked to note the report. That report is for noting. Okay, thank you. Report noted. We'll just give everybody a minute to switch around. Great, we're on to agenda item 6 now. So welcome to all, Tom and team. We'll get you to introduce Tom, if you may. You're presenting item number 6 before scrutiny today. So over to you. If you wouldn't mind just introducing everybody on the desk, or if everyone would kindly introduce themselves, and then we'll go back to you for presenting this agenda item. Thank you.
Sure. John, do you want to start with introductions?
My name is John Green. I'm the manager of the Net Zero delivery team.
Paul Barnard, Service Director for Strategic Planning and Infrastructure.
And Emmanuel Marshall, Net Zero Delivery Officer.
Great. Chair, thank you for the opportunity to present the latest iteration of the Net Zero Action Plan to this committee. This new plan covers the period 2025 to 2028 and builds upon our many successes during 2024. So I just wanted to start by highlighting a little bit of what you've got there in the progress report in the first appendix. We completed the expansion of the e-bike network, reaching 26,000 registered users. 112 people got free access to e-bikes through the Beryl City Council social prescribing offer, which aims to unlock the mental and physical health benefits of active travel. We launched the electric vehicle infrastructure strategy for Plymouth, constructed 40 locations for rapid electric charging points, and were awarded £2.4 million of funding to roll out more electric vehicle charge points for people without off-street parking. We progressed the decarbonisation of our own estate, completing work on air source heat pumps in 8 of our council buildings. And we have secured further funding to decarbonise Harewood House and to improve energy efficiency at Mount Edgecombe. We completed 2 successful housing retrofit projects with Plymouth Community Homes and Live West, which in total delivered improvements to 207 social homes. Our Climate Connections programme of events reached 2,786 individuals, and our social channels reached over 40,000 people across the city. We worked with 40 organisations and community groups across the city to join our Big Green Trail event, which in a unique way we've been working with to digitally produce a truly citywide climate action plan, inviting every organisation to publicly share their own commitments and upload their plans. So far, over 110 local businesses have taken part in that. Last year, we wanted the NZAP to be more city-focused. There was lots on improvements around behaviour change, on business and community engagement, and also that aspect of trying to make sure that every department of the council felt that they were actively playing a part in this agenda. This new Net Zero Action Plan before you today is more strategic and data-led. As such, it focuses more on the high-emitting sectors that will have the greatest impact on decarbonisation. So there are 3 particular areas in this NZAP: transport, buildings, and behaviour change. And I just wanted to give a couple examples of the new commitments for each of those.
So, as I'm sure you're all aware, transport is by far the biggest emitting sector in this city. And what we're trying to do through this NZAP is simply to encourage and enable more sustainable travel options. I wanted to start with one that's garnered a little bit of public debate and make sure we're clear around the scope of that. So we want to explore emissions-based charging for parking. Let me be clear, this is not ULEZ, this isn't a congestion zone. We worded this action very carefully, knowing it could provoke some debate, but also because it's important to note at this stage that we are simply evaluating options. We do not intend a massive hiking of costs for petrol and diesel cars, and no decisions have been made on scale or geographical extent. We hope simply to identify a mild behaviour change nudge. I can reassure the committee today that the local economy will certainly be a key consideration as we look into policy options, and given the cost of living crisis, we will proceed with great care and caution as we work this idea through. There will be extensive engagement before we decide if it is indeed the right fit for Plymouth. We are also putting ourselves forward to have an e-scooter trial in Plymouth, implementing lessons learned from other cities. We will work towards the expansion of the EV car club, and we'll also improve electric vehicle infrastructure, delivering hundreds of more EV charge points across the city. I'm personally very excited, I'm sure Councillor Proston is too, about the first of the new fleet of 50 electric double-decker buses coming to this city alongside bus corridor improvements and regional integrated ticketing. The second area of focus is the decarbonisation of buildings and energy. We will begin the delivery of the externally funded £400 million heat network. I'm proud to say that Plymouth was shortlisted as one of 6 towns and cities nationally to form the first heat network zones, which will channel resources and opportunities to this city. This truly transformational project has the potential to create lots of green jobs, providing renewable heat and cooling in several neighbourhoods of the city, leading to an estimated 30,000 tonnes of CO2 equivalent reductions, I should add. We will support the development of an innovative data centre at the Life Centre to sustainably heat the swimming pool and save lots of money in the process. Across the city, we will continue to deliver housing retrofit schemes with enough funding secured recently to deliver energy efficiency measures to another 700 social homes. The third area of focus is behaviour change initiatives. We will continue our collaborative working with the Plymouth Net Zero Partnership, the Plymouth Growth Board, Food Plymouth and others. We will continue to discuss our plans proactively with groups such as the Plymouth Cycling Campaign and Climate Action Plymouth, who've given us some really constructive feedback over the last year. I'm excited on the other side of my portfolio that we'll also be recruiting recycling officers as part of the street services restructure to improve recycling levels. I'm also keen for the economic development team to support Altilium in setting up the UK's first commercial end-to-end waste recycling plant for electric vehicle batteries here in Plymouth. I had the great pleasure of visiting their offices quite recently with Councillor Evans. It's amazing to see their hopes for this city and why they've chosen to base themselves here. And again, a great opportunity for green jobs. And your last item was on education, the opportunities for Plymouth University graduates to get some really exciting jobs right here on our doorstep. But we recognise we need to do more to communicate the wider benefits of decarbonisation, whether that's cleaner air, healthier travel, cheaper energy bills or greener jobs. And we'll continue to engage residents, businesses and stakeholders on net zero issues, including through the innovative Climate Connections website. I will also personally continue to commit to cross-party working on net zero issues. This year I established a Sustainability Advisory Group comprising Councillors Lugger, Bridgman and Maclay, who've contributed to the preparation of this NZAP and given some really constructive feedback on other topics too. So I'd like to publicly thank them for their constructive observations and also to thank Councillor Lugger as Leader of the Opposition for agreeing to second this Net Zero Action Plan as it goes to full council next month. We also continue to recognise that the resources that are available to us during these incredibly tough financial times are limited, but that should not stifle our collective creativity and commitment to this net zero mission. In that regard, I am happy to confirm to the committee that having restored the Climate Emergency Investment Fund ratchet in last year's budget, this has again been increased as part of this year's budget review process to enable us to support future net zero projects and initiatives. I hope, Chair, that this has given a bit of a sense of all the many ways in which the Net Zero Action Plan will benefit not just our city, but its people and the economy as well. I'd very much like to hear the views of the committee, and I hope that today you feel able to endorse this plan before it goes to full council. I'll be popping back from paternity leave to present full council in March. Thank you, Chair. The officers present and I will be happy to answer any questions or respond to feedback. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Are there any more contributions at this stage? Are you quite content to take questions? Excellent. Well, ordinarily, Councillor Rainsford is straight off the bat and my first questioner, but it's Councillor Bannerman this time. But there we go.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Rainsford. Please, can you give me some more details, really, about the rollout of the food waste collection for households and how we plan to really educate our households, prepare them, and get them excited?
Thank you, Councillor. This is one of the areas that's going to be a big change for our city, and change can be hard for some communities, and we want to make sure we do this well. So food waste is something I've been passionate about for some time, and I think it's fair to say that Plymouth has been beyond certainly most local authorities in the southwest, let alone the country. I'm pleased the new government has offered some change funding for local authorities to do that. So we've recently been able to put in the purchase of the vehicles and caddies through the money we've received from national government. The vast majority of that comes from national government funding. But you're exactly right that we need to prepare residents as well. So I've had a lot of meetings with Rachel, who's the senior project manager who's been working on this project, and also with the comms department to look at not just little bits of comms here and there, but a kind of very concerted campaign to make sure people know the details, they know why this is happening, and the benefits to people as well. This isn't just about another service for people to get used to, but I'm confident it can help with the cost of living worries that we all have. If people realise how much food we throw out as a culture, by seeing that piling up in their caddy, it might change their shopping habits as well, which I think is really exciting. It also links into what we're trying to do with recycling officers. One of my frustrations over the last couple of years is that there hasn't been the capacity, even though there's very much been the will, to try and do more around recycling in street services. And so we've made additional finance available to recruit those recycling officers in the coming year, and they'll very much be part of that process to go out and educate and inform communities. We'll also be working with some of the engagement officers who work at the Energy for Waste plants. They've got a programme there, a lot of outreach to schools. I know from my background as a teacher that one of the best ways of changing behaviour amongst parents is to get the kids excited and get them going back and having those conversations. So it's going to be a long process. It's going to take us a while to make sure we get it right. We're hoping to roll out food waste in a phased way in spring next year. And it's also an item I'll be taking to the cross-party sustainability advisory group to get that feedback and make sure we do it well.
Thank you. Councillor McLeay.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the presentation. There's a lot in the Sense app that's really fantastic work, and I also want to thank you for establishing that cross-party working group. It's been incredibly helpful. My question is on BC 3.1, and it's on stimulate demand for jobs within the green economy through the allocation of levelling up funding to low carbon initiatives. I noticed that status is at risk, and I'm just wondering if you can give us an update on the levelling up funding, particularly because we have just had a presentation on skills and how important it is to grow that part of our economy. So I'm just wondering if you can give us the latest on that.
Yes, so my understanding on that particular one is that the at risk isn't about it happening, it's just about when it will happen, subject to the funding coming through. Emmanuel, did you want to clarify on that?
We saw clarification over this action, Lauren. I think it's because the funding is pending at the moment. It is not within the City Council's hands just yet. So once it is, it has been received, we're able to announce it and able to allocate it in the way that we had anticipated to. So it's just probably just a mild delay to being able to do this.
Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much for the report. It's really interesting and great to see how much work is already underway. Looking at BHP1 on the progress report, it's obvious that there's already been a lot of work done around energy audits and retrofitting the corporate estate. And I'm just wondering if we've got a sense or an idea about how much of a saving that's bringing to council finances, how much money that's bringing in as a result of that work.
Thank you. I think that's a really important question. Sometimes net zero is talked about as if it's something that costs people and companies huge amounts of money. It's a financial burden, and actually there are so many opportunities with finance when it comes to net zero interventions, to the point where I think the finance department probably wished we'd done some of this stuff 10 years ago, because the benefit has been so enormous. So John Green and his team have been working on a calculation based on investment that's gone in over recent years and trying to look at payback periods and roughly how much that totals. So this will relate to things like retrofitting the estate, additional renewable energy, really making sure that energy is kept within buildings. And that's totaling in the region of over £500,000 per year. So an annual saving of £500,000 that the council would not have had if it hadn't invested money for net zero measures. That's not a saving to our department necessarily. That's a saving to the corporate estate, that's a saving to the commercial estate, that's a saving to various other departments. And in these financially stretched times, I think it's a great example of why we need to be thinking outside the box on this. It's also a good example of why we need the Climate Emergency Investment Fund. So that was something that was introduced a few years ago with the opportunity to really think about, if we had a pot of money that was solely put aside for investing in net zero, how could we look more at investor save measures? And so there's an increase in the ratchets that we've continued to reinstate, and I certainly want to see that continue, because there are financial benefits as well as decarbonisation benefits to that.
Sorry, did you have a supplementary?
Yes, please.
Thanks.
Yeah, so you said that you've managed to secure the increase in the ratchet for the next year. Could we therefore make perhaps a recommendation that you seek to continue doing that going forward, and maybe ask finance to look at reviewing any future caps on that, just to make sure that we can keep on having that money aside to make sure we continue to put more money into it?
I would very much welcome that. So at this point, the conversation's been really positive with finance. A lot of the work we're trying to do as administration is looking at multi-year settlements and looking into medium-term financial planning. As it currently stands, I believe that the ratchet is due to increase next year, but I'm very happy to pass that on if that's feedback from the committee.
Could I then make that recommendation, please, Chair?
Well, it's been recorded. Sorry, it's been recorded. So when we come around to voting on whether we wish to endorse and support the plan, we can add that on. Thank you. Anything further, Councillor Smith? Thank you. Councillor Ricketts.
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, Councillor, we've had exchanges before. You know my thoughts. I won't be endorsing this, because I think even if you did every measure in this document, we're not going to hit the target. So that frustrates. I think the public are just getting a little bit, it's been going on for a number of years at all sorts of conventions globally where targets are set and they never get hit. I'm interested by why it's a 3-year plan, not a 5-year plan. I might be wrong, but at some point in this next 3 years, I can see you conceding on this to a more realistic plan. Is it by 2028 you're going to concede that you're not going to hit the target or be anywhere close?
Simple answer is no, but I'm going to give you a long answer. Councillor Ricketts, you've made it very clear at many opportunities, full council, budget, scrutiny, that you have a very different perception of the need for net zero and the pace at which we should deliver it. I actually welcome your challenge around the fact that net zero will be hard to achieve. It will be hard to achieve as a city. It will be hard to achieve as a council. But what I don't agree with is the next quite significant leap in your logic, which is that because it's going to be hard, therefore we shouldn't bother. The importance of the Climate Emergency Declaration that this council made in 2019, before I was elected, but some of you in the room were there, the importance of that wasn't necessarily which year we'll reach net zero. It was that we will accelerate important action over the next decade, because actually in terms of the emissions and the damage it's doing internationally, it's really important that our focus is on as much as we can over the next few years. Interesting question about how many years the plan relates to. Originally, it was a one-year plan, and that was in place for a couple of years. That was because they wanted to start those actions going. But what different parties noticed is that it potentially led to a bit of a short-termism in terms of the commitments, that you're thinking about small, easy wins that you can do, that you can come to a scrutiny like this and say, I've done 100% of my items that I promised, and then we're going to promise another year of short-term actions. And so Councillor Stoneman and working with officers in the previous administration decided they wanted to think more in the medium term. They wanted to think, how can we look more strategically? And that's where you get into some of the more exciting interventions the council has done. If you look at barrel bikes, for instance, that's not something that you can innovate on in 1 year. If you look at the heat network that we're going to start delivering in this period, that's not something that you can just do in 1 year. So the medium term aspect, the 3 years, allows us to do that. But it's a 3 year on an annual rolling basis, because we don't want to issue a plan for 3 years and then disappear for 3 years and you not have the opportunity to continue to scrutinise and for us to continue to innovate. This is a very different plan to what I put forward last year. We've done a lot of stuff, we've worked out which things are more impactful, and we've tried to further it again. With regards to your point about 2030, so we are very clearly measuring emissions and how they change. There's a national 2-year lag on data, so you'll see the data here in this report is based on 2 years ago. It's a national issue with carbon accounting. But I want to draw attention to a particular commitment in here. So page 20 in my pack, BC4, one of the new commitments is to develop a citywide net zero route map with clear milestones acting as support for the Plymouth Net Zero Partnership. And that essentially rises to the challenge you have, which is what are the milestones, what's actually going to get us to net zero, and that's working with some of the biggest employers and organisations in this city so that we're all working together on that. You talk about the public. I actually think a lot of people are very, very interested in this agenda. If you look at polling on nature, if you look at polling on the importance of improving energy efficiency in homes, if you look at people wanting better active travel options, it's not about net zero, it's about the co-benefits that come from that. And that's where we have a very significant difference of opinion.
Got a couple of further questions. On page 2, I've got page 30 at the top, page 2, there's a table A, Plymouth City Council CHG emissions. I just wanted to I just couldn't work it out. There's a column there, staff and councillor travel at work, and then you've got these figures that seem to go down. Can you just take me through this? Because I don't understand it, how these figures have come about.
Sure. So we want to be transparent about our emissions as an organisation, and the data that we use to do that has become more and more sophisticated. I think it's fair to say that the information the council had to hand when the climate emergency declaration was first made was nowhere near what we have now. Now we can look at the data at directorate level, we can look at interventions and look at predictions of how that will impact emissions. So that particular table that you're referring to is looking at the significant sectors which influence particularly our scope 1 and 2 emissions there. So the change is based on the baseline from 2019. So at that point, you're looking at what were our emissions as a local authority then, how has that changed since then, and you can see overall there's been approximately nearly 20% drop in emissions since the climate emergency declaration. However, that's only going up to 2022 figures, which, as I said earlier, there's a lag on the data. So it's a national issue. There's not anything that we can do about that, but this is the most transparent, up-to-date figures that we are able to publish on that.
Yeah, Tom, you're not answering my question. It's on that specific column, staff and councillor travel to work. Are you following me? How do you know what I'm doing when I'm walking, when I'm not?
I have no interest in.
Yeah, but how have you come to the figures? Seem really low as well. And how many councillors actually own and drive an electric car? Are they in the? If you got those figures?
Happy to answer your question. So you're asking about how is that data collected? So we trace the data, particularly of council staff. So we have very, very clear information. For instance, around our significant fleet. We have about 222 vehicles across the council. All of the mileage that is associated with that. We have cars which staff are able to borrow, and that is able to go into those figures as well. And then there's also other modelling that occurs to try to get an accurate estimate of that travel. Some of that is based on modelling. John, I don't know if there's anything you wanted to add on that?
Emmanuel's probably does collection of the data.
So all our calculations are based on a methodology that's accepted internationally. So we follow the advice given. There's been quite a lot of research done in the UK as well to be able to estimate emissions. Now, it's not an easy job, and there are techniques to do this. So here, to calculate this information, we would have used business mileage. So what our colleagues using their own vehicles for work would have claimed, and then we apply what's called an emission ratio to calculate that. And our practices aligns with what is being done nationally and internationally.
I just want the details of this column. Like, there's 57 councillors. You ended up with a figure of 157. How do you know? How do you know the councillor travel arrangements?
We are a council with over 2,000 employees, and so the modelling is primarily based on officers. If you wanted to make a recommendation that we did a survey around how councillors travel, I'm very interested to pursue that. There's also, you made the suggestion earlier, there was a kind of hypocrisy in how councillors and officers get to work. One thing I'd like to say on that is actually I've been really impressed by how the net zero officers, the natural infrastructure officers I work with really put a lot of this into practice in their own life. And from a councillor point of view, my main mode of transport to get here is cycling. If you look at Councillor Coker, he got rid of his car quite a few years ago because he was talking so much about buses and wanted to actually put that into practice. So the hypocrisy implied really isn't there.
I would just add, in terms of the actual data each year, we collect it from the HR system such that we know exactly what has been claimed by each member of staff in terms of mileage. We know what type of vehicle they've got. We know the emissions in relation to that type of vehicle. And we also know our own fleet. And so we know the actual mileage for the fleet, and we know the actual emissions from that fleet. So it's actually actual data in most cases. It is for all staff in relation to councillors. Then that's not, we don't have all of that data.
Just to bring this point to a conclusion, the science is based on what's claimed by staff, essentially. If staff vehicles or staff use, that goes through a claims portal system, so we have that accuracy of that data, and then the calculation you made reference to, Emmanuel, that makes sense of that. Councillors, some councillors submit travel expenses for various aspects of their work. Not all councillors do, obviously, but equally not all councillors are required to document how they travel, when they travel, and why they travel. And I suspect if there was a straw sample taken of councillors, it's another level of bureaucracy that I certainly wouldn't be supportive of in terms of submitting those. So it's accurate in the sense of employees, which is the majority of number, councillors of which there are 57. It's a very small few that are contributing to that scheme. So I think we can accept that point. Is there anything else you wish to bring up before I bring in other councillors? Because I've given you a bit more time than others.
It's got one more on the paper. On page 7, at the top it's 35. It talks about the wider benefits from the council taking climate action. There's one paragraph I couldn't get my head around. If you could just clarify. The investments have led to income generation from the sale, I don't know what that, of renewable energy and a reduction in the city council's energy bills, providing an ongoing and annual benefit to the city council in the region of £500,000. Could we have a breakdown of how you've come to that figure, please?
Yeah, we've worked closely with the finance team. So I'll give a few examples, but just to say that we've looked at every single major investment we've made. If you take, say, for example, the Western Approach solar system on the top of the car park, we get a kind of a revenue from that of a significant amount, and we get each year. So that's part of it. So there's clear income that you get from renewable energy sales from PV, for photovoltaics, which is part of that calculation. So that's the income. In terms of the savings, we've invested in energy efficiency in buildings, so you can get a feel for what the energy use was before, and with the EPC rating increase, what the energy use is now. You know what the difference is between those two, and you can calculate. It is a calculation of the saving. You can never be totally sure of what it is. But if you look at that, of all the investments that we've made across the council in the different departments, it's roughly about £500,000 per year, and we've got a spreadsheet which we've used with the finance team, and they've kind of analysed that based upon the business cases that we took and based upon the assessment that we've done.
And just from my understanding, Councillor Barisdale said that as a result of the initiatives that we put in place, the local authority saves about £500,000 a year. Is that the 500,000 investment? This is the same figure, it's not a different figure. Okay, sorry. Please be brief, because there are other people on the list. I've been very indulgent.
Yeah, thank you. Just one more, because you raised it, Tom, which was about the parking thing, where people get very agitated. My residents are very agitated. I think the agitation has been caused by, if you just said we're putting up parking charges in the city, people wouldn't like it, but it would kind of be a logical thing that's happened for decades. It's the fact that you've thrown the net zero situation into it. Hardly anybody drives an electric vehicle. I don't think there's any councillor that owns an electric vehicle. And okay, does anyone drive an electric vehicle in this room?
I know a number of
Does anyone own an electric vehicle?
Councillor Allen owns an electric vehicle.
You do. Congratulations. Okay.
All right. Let's put rather than descending into a debate, let's put your question to the officer.
Why can't you
please.
just say you're putting up parking charges rather than do it because it's because of net zero and targeting petrol and diesel drivers? Why can't you just do that?
What you're saying is a complete misrepresentation of what we're doing. So the wording of that commitment is very, very precise. We are looking at options, we're looking at benefits, we're looking at feasibility. Nowhere in that does it say fees are going up. If, for instance, we were to look at one aspect of parking, there are various bits under street services where they're not legally allowed to make a significant profit with that. You should know that from your previous experience as Cabinet Member for Transport. CPZ zones, for instance, have to be cost neutral. You should only, all the money should go back into the costs from that. All that is trying to do is to look at the fact that there are many, many things that people will consider, for instance, when they are to buy a new car. They might look at the appearance of the car. They might think, how is this going to help me and my family? Is it going to be a big enough boot? And one of the things that we're just going to do a slight behaviour change nudge around is to think, actually, should emissions be considered by families looking at that? It will not be a hike. And as I clearly said earlier, we do not need ULEZ here. We do not need a congestion zone here. Our air quality results have been improving for the last few years, which is why the air quality management area was revoked. So it's not the case that this is a car parking charge hike on the quiet. That's simply not true. And there's going to be a lot of work over the next few months looking at options. And I'm sure there'll be a huge amount of engagement, both with councillors and with residents, to make sure it's in the best interests of the city.
I'm grateful. Okay, we're moving on. Councillor Moore, please.
Thank you, Chair. I've just got one question, no follow-ups or addendums to follow. Page 12, on going back to BHP1, there's a reference to exploring the viability of hosting a data centre at the Life Centre to reduce gas consumption. Could you just tell us a little bit more how putting a data centre next to a swimming pool helps to reduce gas consumption?
Thank you. Good question. It is a confusing concept. Essentially, as the way in which we use technology shifts, there's a requirement for additional data centres to store and process everything that we're doing. And it's quite interesting how that applies to the the sustainability sector more widely. In fact, Councillor McClay raised a really good point in our cross-party meeting around this. So previously, one of the issues that data centres have faced is the huge volume of water that is needed in order to cool the data centre down. You think all of those miles of wire and the amount of heat that produces from that processing. And so they've tended to use water as a coolant so that is able to operate. On the other end of the spectrum, you have this issue up and down the country where local authorities are really struggling to finance their swimming pools. I went to a meeting in Westminster just a few weeks ago where a councillor, a cabinet member there, said they've had to close their local authority swimming pools because of budget cuts they're doing. We are not looking at that here, I hasten to add, before Plymouth Live represent that in a certain way. But we're always looking for ways in which we can save. So putting a data centre right next to the life centre offers a mutually beneficial opportunity. The data centre needs water to cool down. We've got water sitting right next to it, but we also have a massive, innovative swimming pool that we want to heat cheaply. At the moment, the life centre has a huge gas bill every year trying to heat that up. And so we're using the heat from the data centre in this proposition to help warm up our swimming pool, reducing our need for gas, but we're also helping the data centre to cool it through the water that the council is responsible for. And we're looking at options. It would have to go through planning, is my understanding. But there's been significant engagement with a company operating in that space. And again, it's another great example of how net zero innovation can save money.
Thank you. Councillor Noble.
There's lots of technical aspects in the plan. What will residents notice? What type of things will residents notice?
That's a really interesting question, Will. One of the difficulties with the NZAP, and I'm sure you've all found this over the last few days, is it's essentially, no offence, Emmanuel, it's a spreadsheet for officers to put into action. That's what it is at the end of the day. It's a very complicated, wide-ranging action plan, and that's to make sure it's delivery focused. It has to be that way if we're about actually changing things. But one thing that we can do better is making sure residents see that benefit. So the Life Centre example we just talked about is an interesting one. People will see it there and then. They won't necessarily know the heat's coming from a different source, and we need to talk about that. If you think about transport, there are aspects of this net zero action plan that people will immediately see, whether it's the expression of interest in the e-scooter trial, whether it's the new zebra buses, which I know Councillor Ricketts is very excited about, and maybe the sneeze is an allergic reaction to that net zero investment. Housing, I'm sure many of you in different wards have heard some really worrying stuff about damp and mould, about struggling to pay energy bills. The work that we do at Plymouth Energy Community is actually making discernible difference to how people heat their homes. Another 700 social homes getting retrofitting through the investment that the council is channeling towards those. And so on all of those areas, there'll be things that we hope residents, in your ward and in all of those wards will feel that benefit. But we need to be better at communicating that too. We need to talk less about emissions. We need to talk less about net zero. We need to be talking about cleaner air, about healthier transport, about cosier homes. And that's when I think it lands better with people.
Any supplementary?
So earlier on in January, I went to the handing over of some new houses to PCH, and they had electric vehicle points outside and air source heat pumps, boilers, fancy boiler. Are those examples of things that can be retrofit? Could they be retrofitted to our existing estates? Out where I live, there is in Liam. There's not a lot of opportunity for everyone to have car charging because very few driveways or garages with those type of facilities. And I know in town, in some of the closer to the city centre wards, there's the Victorian terraces and things. So is that an area where that might be possible?
Two yeses, essentially. So the warm home local grant, air source heat pumps can come with that, and that's very much what we've been doing for our own estate. Pool Farm, for instance, in your ward, it's worth talking to them about that. On EV charging, it is really difficult for certain wards. I live in Stoke and represent Stoke, for instance. Quite a lot of terraced Victorian houses don't necessarily have drives, and so people say, therefore, I can't have an EV. And actually what we're doing is working with Levi, which is an over £2 million national grant, looking at how can we use that funding to reduce some of those challenges. And one of the projects in that is called the Gully trial, Gull-E, and it's essentially an innovative way of dropping a cable down into the pavement, so it's not a trip hazard, but using households' electrical supply, so it's cheaper than if you were to go with a private company's kind of pop-up charger or some of the other options that we have in the city. And yes, on both of those areas, we'll continue to try and do more.
Thank you. Councillor McCarthy.
Thanks, Chair. Thank you for the presentation. It was really good. I always appreciate dialogue when it comes to climate change. I've got a preamble to a question. I think the United Nations Framework Convention for Climate Change was set up with a view to stop global temperatures rising beyond a level that wouldn't significantly impact every single person on our planet. We talk about 1.5 degrees or 2 degrees, and there's lots of schools of research where we sit on that trajectory at the moment. But I want to be really clear, this is not us and them. I would hope, I look to the chair, I would hope, looking to my left, that we'd be cross-party in our support of these types of initiatives. And I think, this piece that, if something's a challenge, we should potentially let go of it, is a worrying part of our society today. This is so important for not just us, but future generations. And I think that is, it's so important. Young people care more about the climate now. They're more informed, they're more mobilised, and that framework, which is a really good framework to look to, it sets out, I think it's 13.3 in the goals. It sets out that, we should be looking as not just cities, but as nations and as a planet to educate and inform people around climate change, the initiatives and the endeavours we can make to try and combat that. So I really welcome everything you're talking about, and I think it takes a lot to sort of acknowledge that some of the things are going to be hard things to talk about because they are going to polarise people, but we have to do that. It's so important. So preamble over, I guess the question would be, what does PCC look to do immediately and going forward, with a view, picking up as well on the question around 3 years versus 5 years. We're working towards 2030, so we need to be thinking about this year, next year. 3 years, great. 5 years, okay, let's worry about that as we get closer to that. What does PCC want to do and is thinking to strive to do for young people to engage them with this topic of climate change? Sorry, I'm really passionate about this.
Yeah, that's a great preamble. Don't apologise for it. Like you all know, I used to be a teacher, and I think lots of my views around the climate emergency weren't shaped by what I was reading or what I was seeing in the news, but it was through that passion from young people. Someone suggested earlier that the public don't care about this. You go and speak to a class of teenagers and you'll meet a lot of people who really do care. And I think in the last year, as a team, we've really stepped up what we do around engagement. So we recently launched a Youth Climate Ambassadors programme, so taking the work that Emmanuel and others were doing around kind of community champions, but mostly adults of a certain age, probably fair to say, and actually think, how can we do that to really target younger people, make sure that we're learning from them and channeling that energy. And assuming my baby doesn't come this weekend, which there is a chance of, I'm meeting them on Monday evening and really looking forward to getting that more input from them. We've got similar things on the natural infrastructure side, which I know I'm not here to talk about today, but if you look at some of the projects happening at Pool Farm around getting those green skills in at a really early age, really exciting stuff about green jobs. but we're also trying to make them inform our processes too. So the work we're doing on the Plymouth Plan for Nature and People has a youth representative on the steering group. I'm not sure how she does it. You know, I would have hated the idea of that as a teenager. I would have found it very intimidating. She comes along and tries to help us engage more with that target demographic. We've written to every single school in the city. We did a joint letter between myself and Councillor Cresswell, trying to give them ideas, not just about how they can decarbonise their own estate, but getting involved in the Let's Go Zero national campaign. Some great initiatives around there that we've been trying to encourage schools to do. And also, we recently did a Climate Legends competition. I had a young person category. In fact, there's a video, if you follow Climate Connections on Facebook, there's a video that we posted this morning. A young guy called Archie, who's won in the youth category, and Marine Academy Plymouth won the category as well, the work they're doing as a school. So celebrating that, encouraging it, and trying to link it all together, essentially.
Thank you. Councillor McClay.
Sorry, Chair, supplementary. I guess my challenge would be, you know, could you think, and not to necessarily answer now, but on what the stretch could be? You know, what could be the challenge and what could you do? And could PCC look at going forward to really do and deliver more?
Let's take it up online. We're really pleased to hear other ideas or how we could do more in that space.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to pick up on actually a little bit of what's come out of the conversation as a whole today, but was particularly brought out by Councillor Noble and actually by Councillor Ricketts, is I, probably like a lot of people in this room, I'm hugely concerned about climate scepticism. And I think that comes from a place of often misunderstanding, but often not understanding the opportunities and the benefits of it as well. I think this is a fantastic document. As you said, it is very officer focused. What I'd love to see, and perhaps this is a recommendation that come out of today, is for a public facing climate communications document to give our staff that front foot, knowing the challenges that are going to come out of some of the big projects that we have coming up, like food waste, like parking, like the heat network, to make sure that when we announce these fantastic, visionary, transformative things for the city, we're meeting that with a communications plan that is robust and challenges the perceptions up front rather than being reactive.
That's really useful observation. One thing that I would encourage everyone to look at is that Climate Connections website, because that's what we're essentially doing on here. This document is for officers. You know, it might be very, very keen residents, you know, Ricky for Climate Action Plymouth, for instance, who reads every single word of this and gives us great feedback. But 99% of residents, this isn't what I'd recommend that they look at to see what we're doing. The Climate Connections website essentially gives a more user-friendly summary of the kind of work we're doing. It highlights case studies of what businesses are doing as well. And so as ward councillors, the more you can do to push that out on, you know, community groups or on your own social media, that would be really beneficial. We've got a full-time communications person who works in the Net Zero team, so there's been much more video content coming out there recently. And they've also looked at things like targeted ads and use of those website platforms so that we can be a bit more tech-savvy when it comes to that engagement.
I do want to come back to your recommendation as well at the end of the discussion. So, Councillor Rainsford.
Thank you, Chair. I've got two very short questions, if I may. And can I thank you and your team for putting this plan together, because it's incredibly thorough. And you're right, it's very dry. And so I totally concur with Councillor McClay that, you know, getting messaging out on the benefits and the opportunities is hugely important. And linked to that, therefore, we're expanding the number of EV charging points around the city. Is there any way that the public can influence where they are placed?
Really good question, and luckily, nice simple answer. So I can never remember what the website's called. So every time I try to find this, I just Google Plymouth EV charging strategy, and the website comes up. And essentially, as part of the consultation we did on that strategic document, which looks forward to, I think, a 10-year period for what we're trying to implement on EVs. There are various different questions looking about where people most want and need EV charging, the different types that they would benefit from. And there's an interactive map on that website. And so even though the consultation is now finished and the document has been published, I believe, John, I'm right in saying that map is still live. And so if you have residents get in touch with you and say, you know, we are considering buying an EV, maybe they're looking at a second-hand option. There's some really cheap EV options on the market. And to then be able to pinpoint on their map, this is a street that we'd be interested in an EV charging option, then that's something that can be looked at. And I believe there's also still opportunity as part of the Gully scheme. John, you're very involved in this. Do you want to answer that, Tom?
Yeah, so as part of that pavement channel option, we're doing a trial of 100 homes where you can get a connection from your home to the space where hopefully sometimes you're able to park outside your home to charge the vehicle. So we're still looking for some more people that want to join that trial. And then as well as that, as was mentioned earlier, we've just got over £2 million from the Levi Fund where we'll install charge points in every single area of the city. So we've divided the city up to 164 areas. Everyone will receive some charge points so that people have got a place near to where they live where they can charge. And that we use the data that's on the map that was just mentioned to help influence us where those charge points will go.
Thank you. And if I could quickly come back on an issue around embedded carbon. You've got sort of scope 1, 2 and 3. It's not clear in those different categories exactly where embedded carbon through, for example, demolition of buildings sits, and how that also links into the BHP 6, where we're looking at infrastructure and construction, and whether that's all lumped together, and we'll have a better understanding of what the emissions potentially are for that.
Yeah, this is an incredibly complex aspect of carbon accounting, which is a kind of job role in its own right, and I don't pretend to be any expert in that field. But essentially, for those people that are newer to the space, Scope 1, 2 and 3 are different ways of looking at how we calculate the emissions that an organisation is either directly responsible for or might be part of their wider procurement channels and that kind of thing. And it's really important that every aspect of what the council does is included as part of that. Demolition and how we look at the estate is a really interesting one when it comes to emissions, because you know, sometimes local authorities like shiny new buildings, but actually if you're knocking down a building that could be used in a better way, maybe for a different team, maybe in a different public-facing way, there's certainly ways of improving that building, and in some cases it would be more beneficial from a carbon point of view to retrofit it. And so there'll always be work with the Net Zero team looking at options for that building before decisions were made. In terms of a project management level, any major new project that would have significant emissions implications, we'd always encourage that team to be looking at more detailed carbon assessments to look at the optioneering around that. And it's also the kind of thing that we would hope would come into the climate impact assessment. So this is something we introduced quite recently, about a year ago. Every single key decision at a cabinet or at a senior officer level has to go through a climate impact assessment, 8 different aspects, both relating to nature and the climate, where we're trying to tease out those kind of topics and make sure that officers who aren't net zero officers or who might not be climate trained are thinking about waste, they're thinking about emissions, they're thinking about water quality and all of those. So in the waste aspect, you know, that could certainly come into it with regards to the embodied carbon that you know would be affected with regards to something like that. Anything anyone else wants to add on that?
Just to add that obviously from a planning point of view and the consideration of the acceptability or otherwise of the demolition of buildings, we now have the climate emergency statement, which does look at the whole issue of embodied carbon in existing buildings. Obviously there may be other reasons why you would still want to demolish a building, but that issue is now explicitly considered as part of the overall judgment.
You preempted my supplementary.
I'm grateful, thank you. Just before we move on to recommendations, which connects your point about how the positive story is told and directing people to the right website. An example of that is you're still looking for volunteers for this trial. Now, I may have missed the email. Those who know me, I do miss a lot of emails. But have councillors been emailed to say, look, you can volunteer somebody in your ward or any of your residents have you used the 57 councillors to help promote this trial scheme? If not, why not? And if I've missed the email, I'll apologise.
I don't think we have directly sent it to each of the councillors, but we can do. And we've actually had 87 so far who've come forward. So we're kind of close to the end of that. We have publicised it kind of across the city in different ways. So
there are many wards who have very keen individuals in their wards, and they'd be quite willing to volunteer for this. But I raised that with the fear as I was developing that point, going, I probably have ignored an email about that, but I'm glad to hear that I haven't. Okay, so look, during that debate, that's a very good debate, a very interesting report. There were a couple of recommendations. Hannah, did you capture those eloquently that you're now going to share with the group?
Through you, Chair, I haven't caught Councillor Macleigh's wording specifically, if you've got a suggestion, but the first one from Councillor Smith is that a ratchet increase had been secured for this year. Is that 2025-26?
So that refers to this February's new budget for the next year.
Lovely, that's fine. I just want to make sure I got the year right. The panel recommends seeking this again and to ask Finance to review any future caps to ensure the money is set aside and can be added to.
So if we're content to include that recommendation, do I need a show of hands for that?
We can do all the recs.
Yeah, we can do all the
the
recs.
end.
Okay, excellent. Sorry, the second recommendation, as I understood it, is we need to be more prominent in regards to telling the story. So whilst I appreciate there are other platforms, but those who are used to navigating the council's website, it's difficult in itself. And equally, is it prominent enough on the council's website to say, dial in here for, is it worth looking at how we take it to market? Is that what you were saying, Lauren, or have I expanded your point?
No, I think that is accurate. I think I would probably phrase it as develop a climate communications plan as one of the goals within the NZAP. And I appreciate there's a lot of work being done in that area already. I just feel like it needs to be brought together under a single mission.
And less officer focused, more user focused. Is that right? It's not. It doesn't need to be technical. It's a public facing platform.
I'm just very happy with that recommendation. If it's useful as well, I could ask Lou Brooke to come along to the cross-party sustainability group, because she does a lot of work around the behaviour change and engagement bit, and so she could bring the different groups up to speed on what we already do, and then have that conversation about what could we do on top of that as well.
Yeah, and just we need to be explicit, expressly clear about, we need to look at our own website, the interface with the public, as to see if it's prominent enough on there to say, hey, look to see what we're doing, as opposed to it being buried away somewhere on a document on a various link. If it was more prominent, people might be encouraged to click through.
Okay, so my attempt at putting that together would be to recommend the development of a climate communications plan, specifically looking at the public interface on PCC's website.
Or to
include. To include. Okay, so we've got that recommendation.
Have I hijacked your recommendation?
And then, as I read out previously, a ratchet increase had been secured for the next year, and the panel recommends seeking this again and to ask Finance to review any future caps to ensure the money is set aside and can be added to, and that the committee are asked to support and endorse the PCC Net Zero Action Plan 2025 to 2028.
Excellent. So do we have to take the recommendations separately, or do we take it all together?
If everyone's happy to take a vote on all three.
Are we content to take it all together? Yeah? Okay, I'm seeing about it. So the vote is, in addition to the recommendations we've just discussed, we support and endorse the Plymouth City Council Net Zero Action Plan. So can I have a show of hands in favour of that? Okay, anyone against? Anyone abstaining? Councillor Ricketts abstains. Yeah. Thank you very much for attending. Happy to support and best of luck with it. Thank you.
Can I just thank the committee for it? I also wanted to give personal thanks to Emmanuelle. So she spends thousands of hours going through every council department, chasing people on progress updates, and it's a thankless task. So thank you, Emmanuel, for all the work you've done to get this document collated together. Thank you.
Welcome back, members. A warm welcome to Councillor Lang and team. Agenda item number 7. Councillor Lang, are you going to introduce everyone around the table and then present this item, please?
Yes, I can do that, certainly. Well, I mean, they can introduce themselves. Yes. David, do you want to start with you?
I'm pretty sure I know everyone. It's David Draffin, the Council's Director for Economic Development. Nice to meet you all.
Hannah Harris, Chief Exec of Plymouth Culture. Victoria Pommery, Chief Exec of The Box in Plymouth.
Thank you, Councillor Lang. We have thousands of people online, and whilst we are very familiar with who everybody is, they may not be familiar online. Thank you. Over to you, Councillor Lang.
Thank you, Chair. I want to start by saying that as a city and a council and a party, we've been a constant champion for culture. Against a backdrop of national cuts and an economic crisis, we've continued to invest in culture because we recognise its value and significant contribution to the city, to society, and to our residents. This strategic approach has been very successful, securing external partnerships and investment, which has enabled us to develop and grow our cultural infrastructure. This approach has made possible capital projects like the Box and Market Hall, as well as ensuring we maintain Arts Council investment of over 4 million each year in 8 of our cultural organisations. As a result of this success, we've identified a need and opportunity to apply this methodology of tailored strategy, partnership and investment to the creative industries. We know that the cultural sector and creative industries are connected, but not one and the same thing. Therefore, we need a tailored strategy to consider the unique aspects of the creative industries. An overview of what the creative industries is like in Plymouth currently comprise 648 registered companies, employ about 5,000 people with a further 4,000 in the wider creative economy, account for 2.1% of employment in Plymouth, contribute nearly 135 million in GVA, support 1.9 additional jobs in leisure and retail for every creative job, generate a further, I'm not sure what that is actually, not sure if there's missing. No.
50p for every.
50p in other sectors for every pound contributed in GVA. Whilst this is a strong starting position, it shows a sector that has plateaued and is not tracking growth at the same rates as we see for the sector in the Southwest or nationally. And this means that we can't rely on organic growth alone. We need an economic sector plan that aligns with our city ambition so that the creative industries can fully contribute to our future economic and social prosperity. We can't just hope it will happen. We need to take steps to make it happen. We asked Plymouth Culture to commission a creative industries plan, which has helped to define the scale of the opportunity and the interventions that we need to achieve growth. As a result of our years of hard work and commitment to culture, we know we have the right foundations and conditions required to achieve growth in the creative industries. So this presents a genuine opportunity for the city. The very nature of the sector, with its multiplier and spillover impact, means investment in and growth of the creative industries will complement our wider city agenda and the ambitions set out in the Growth Alliance Plan and the economic strategy. Hannah is now going to talk you through the scale of the opportunity and proposed recommendations for action. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Could I have the next slide? Great, thank you. So just to reiterate what Councillor Lang has spoken about, we, in our culture plan, presented this diagram, which made it really clear that the culture plan was really focused on that kind of numbers 3, 4 and 5. You know, it sits along that kind of heritage, arts, cultural activity, but there is a much wider creative industries and digital sector, and then around that sits a much bigger creative economy. So what we've done is really invested in 3, 4 and 5, and we're saying that there's a huge opportunity then for these other sector localities to build on the foundations that we've set. So we set that out in the culture plan, and we're now working on this plan to sort of identify how we do that. Thank you. So just to sort of run through the scale of the opportunity and the
the state of things within Plymouth. As has been mentioned, it's been relatively stagnant in terms of a sector since about 2015. But we do have this wider creative economy that's really quite particular to Plymouth and really exciting as a potential for us. So there are a lot of creative jobs in what we would consider non-creative industries. And that's a real unique thing that you'll see as we move forward, is one of the things we really want to double down on as an opportunity for us in the city. Thank you. Not surprisingly, and it's not unusual for a city of this size, we have very few large anchor institutions and then a plethora of smaller micro businesses. Whilst it's not unusual for a city of this size, it does create a very particular economy where you have far less spin-out opportunities, you don't have that competitive innovation that's happening necessarily. So it requires just a very particular type of economic development to kind of bolster that and build on it where we can. Thank you. And again, not unfamiliar for a city of this size and against the national picture, our kind of key growth subsectors sit within those top three, and they are the largest in both GVA turnover and actual job count. So there's very little, there's a bit of bounce between those. Those three are also three of the 5 nationally large subsectors. So there's we would expect to be seeing that within the city, but we've got a real proportion of smaller micro businesses that sit within those sectors as well. Thank you. So we did a little bit more, you'll see within the report, a little bit more digging into, so what does this actually mean for Plymouth? Where's the sort of specialism? How does it compare? And we looked at, this shows the sort of concentration. So it's not just numbers, but it's actually the concentration and whether you actually as a city have a sort of competitive advantage. You'll see that even though those 3 subsectors are large subsectors, they are not against a sort of national picture or what you might expect to be in a city, anything over and above. In fact, lots of them are smaller than we might anticipate, apart from craft and then music, performing and visual arts. So whilst craft as a concentration is large within the city, it's not big numbers. There's sort of 45 businesses in that area. So we're not proposing that as the kind of growth agenda here. But the actual kind of subsector around music, performing and visual arts is a genuine USP that you don't see in that sort of concentration in other cities. So that's where we sort of majored on that being something we can really evidence and build upon. Thank you. So the scale of the opportunity, this is what we wanted to talk about. So what we've mentioned within the report is the data shows us really good foundations, but limited growth, and certainly not at the national or the southwest rate. So there's an opportunity here that we're sort of missing out on. If we were to boost the job share in GVA to the national average and growth rate, these are the sorts of numbers we'd be looking at. Now, we won't reach that. We have a different economy. We have a different mix of business. So the work for us to do around the implementation plan, which I'll come on to in a moment, is to really identify in more detail what proportion of those jobs we really think we can target here and the timescales over which that's possible so that it fits into our wider economic development strategy for the city. Thank you. And why we think there's a sort of Plymouth advantage in all of this is that, yes, we can look at national growth and sort of talk about the fact that we have a very different economy, but the growth of the sector within the southwest alone has been significant and is the fastest growing, the joint fastest, sorry, mustn't forget the southeast, joint fastest creative industries sector as a region and nationally. So what we're saying is the growth is actually happening in our region, but we're not pulling it into Plymouth. And so that creates an opportunity that isn't just about, stealing national advantage, but actually capturing what's already on our doorstep in a better way than we are. And we think Plymouth's really well positioned for that on a kind of regional basis because we already have anchor institutions. So we believe we've got the foundations there from the cultural sector. We have a really high proportion of young people within the city, and many of those are in further and skilled activity, which means we kind of have a ready workforce for the sector. We still have reasonably affordable house prices in comparison to earnings, so there's an incentive there against some of the other places in the southwest. And we have really good digital connectivity, so as a sector, we have all the characteristics and conditions you would want to put forward for a creative industries development plan. And so we just need to focus on how we get them here, not to the rest of the Southwest. Thank you. So the recommendations, we have a kind of overarching recommendation that underpins everything, which is ensuring that the creative industries is embedded in all council areas and policies. So this has to be a very holistic approach to what we're talking about, particularly if we're talking about the wider creative economy and not just a kind of vertical sector. So that kind of underpins all of the recommendations. Thank you, Hannah. And then our kind of central recommendation is about the creation of these cultural and creative clusters. So the idea that we would identify locations within the city, in particular where we already have an anchor institution, so we can already demonstrate skills, USP, and an actual market. And then to build around that opportunities for growth, where we have a supply chain building around that, we have a workforce building around that. And so that would mean within those cluster localities, work around policy so that we make sure that the businesses that are in those locations are artistic and creative, and we're not sort of undermining our own development plans. We look at spaces that are suitable for that sort of sector, and we look at the skills and business support packages that you would see within that area being bespoke to the creative industries. Thank you. We have done some work about identifying those potential first clusters. As I mentioned, they are intentionally around existing anchor institutions, so hopefully shouldn't be any surprises in what we see there. One of which is the cultural cluster around the box and the universities. The other around a performance space, so that plays into the data that's telling us, you know, Theatre Hall Plymouth is a real asset, but actually there's potential around that to create a sort of corridor of activity around performance more widely, including music, so extending that piece within the city. The Create Tech cluster in Devonport surrounding the Market Hall, particularly its relationship to other sectors, so marine and healthcare. And then TR2, which we know is an incredible asset for the city, is already operating at capacity and has potential to evolve into more of a kind of production park setup that we see in other areas, and that convergent space of screen and stage coming together for new industry. Thank you. And then again, a couple of underpinning recommendations that really support that, which is this only works if we nurture new investment and have a bespoke business support packages. So as well as the spatial dimension, there's the kind of support programme that sits around it. That needs to be at every stage, so not just new start and emerging, but also growth and investment in growth. And then the thing that we really came out of the data that we perhaps weren't expecting was this importance around the tech sector, sort of digital tech, IT sector, that we have obviously included within the creative industries plan, but it's actually quite an underpinning sector for all growth and development. If you think about advanced manufacture, there's a whole tech and digital element to that. So we think that's a wider conversation for partners about what we're doing to really attract those businesses, particularly around IP producing businesses within that sector. Thank you. So we've sort of outlined what we found and what we think the recommendations are. Our work now is to build that into a full action plan and an implementation sort of timeline of what that looks like. It's very much our intention that this is a sector-led proposition, and that's where we see it working well in other locations. It's sector-led with a creative partnership around it. Obviously, there's a role for the council to be an enabler and a supporter in that space. So we're looking into more detail about exactly what that means and how we align that with the wider economic development strategy. And then this only works through external partnerships and investment as well. So where are the other partners that we haven't yet perhaps capitalised our relationship with? We have a really good strategic working relationship with the Arts Council for Culture. So what's the equivalent for the creative industries? Things like Innovate UK, things like Creative UK, where we're seeing they are directly investing in programmes of activity in other places. We haven't landed that yet here in the city. Thank you.
Great. Are there any more contributors? Super. Okay. Members, it's over to you. Having read the papers and listened to that presentation, who'd like to go first? Oh, it's Councillor Rainsford. No, we'll leave her to last. Councillor McLean.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the presentation. I used to work in the creative industries myself in theatre when I was up in Scotland, and this is a problem that we kind of see across the UK. But I do appreciate that since moving to Plymouth, that figure 4 of the microclusters within Plymouth, when I moved here, that was something that I really felt as a shift, and it's good to see that kind of my thinking borne out into what is actually happening. I think there is a really interesting role for PCC to play here as part of this plan. When I worked in theatre, that piece on place and space, it was really difficult to find affordable spaces to be able to test work, to be able to bring in creatives, to be able to develop artists and also kind of let that work fail. You know, you don't make Lin-Manuel Miranda in a day. That takes decades of work and development. I did wonder if there was a space for the council to provide in-kind support in terms of unused space and buildings, perhaps office space to allow creatives to come in to test new work, to have rehearsals, that sort of thing. I'm just wondering if that has been thought of as part of the policy thus far.
So yes, having run the Meanwhile Use programme in the city over the last couple of years, I think there's a huge potential to allow for that experimental, low-risk opportunity. I think the key thing with this is making sure that the things we're creating space to test are linked to our long-term strategy. And I think that's the difference here. We've got plenty of people with ideas in the city, which is fantastic. But which of those are really going to stimulate growth? And I think the work we've done previously around the cultural sector isn't always directly connected to economic development. And so there's a slightly different sort of twist on this plan. And so I think, yes, those opportunities would be fantastic, but identifying which subsectors we might prioritise, which locations might be the most appropriate to align them to other opportunities should they work and should they want to scale and grow will be the real key to making sure that isn't just a plethora of things happening, but actually kind of stimulating economic growth.
There's also the demolition work at Tavistock Place and the discussion around what's going to go there, and that fits into this culture cluster area. So obviously those conversations are at a very early stage, but I personally would like to sort of see some kind of space like that, where whether it's young people or emerging artists or something along those lines, to have a space and a place where they can develop. I don't know what that will look like yet, but that's definitely part of what I want to input into the conversation about what that area gets used for.
Any supplementary? Thank you, Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks very much for the report. It's really exciting work and really excited to see where it goes. I guess it must be useful now to be doing this work when we've finally got a government again that values creative industries. So just wondering how maybe what we're looking to do fits in with national priorities and national plans, and whether that makes our work that bit easier because of that.
Yeah, no, Victoria might want to add to this, but the timing it is no accident because this is a real opportunity to land some of this and really get some profile on that national picture. Firstly, because it's been identified as a priority sector within the industrial strategy and will have its own sort of sector plan developing. I think if we can demonstrate a sort of leadership role within the region around this, then there's a possibility to inform directly that kind of national picture, which is really good. There's also been some work happening locally through Creative UK and the Create Growth programme, which there was a summit last week, and that was a real opportunity to land this kind of work and try and get that kind of voice lifted a little bit into central government as well. So yeah, I think the timing's by design right for what we're doing, and that's why we sort of don't want to miss the opportunity to connect with some of these national partners as well.
Did Victoria want to come in on that, or and then Councillor Lang?
No, I don't agree totally with all of that. I think the other thing about Plymouth is it's strong HE. So we have 3 universities in the city, one of which is an arts university. So I think it's also about making sure, and there is alignment with people studying here and then wanting to remain in the city. And I think that graduate retention is really important for the city.
I only wanted to add that you know, I was really pleased to see that there was a really big creative industry summit in Gateshead last month, which Lisa and Andy sort of introduced and was a big part of. So just seeing those conversations taking place at national level and valuing this sector reflects, you know, the work we've been doing for a long time in Plymouth, and it's really good to see it happening at national level as well. And we repeatedly, that's too strong a word, we really want to get some ministerial visits to Plymouth when their diaries allow. I think things are still, you know, I know it's been 7 months, but still trying to get things into people's diaries is a challenge, but we will keep on inviting people to come to Plymouth to see what we're doing, and I'm sure they'll come when it's appropriate for them to do so. But we do, so you know, we do keep extending that invitation because we want to show off what we're doing, and it's in line with you know, a number of government initiatives and the direction that sector is taking.
Councillor McCarthy.
Thanks, Chair. No, it was interesting to listen to the report, and I think that last point Victoria made around sort of retaining and the retention of graduates. We've heard on this committee previously around the discussions and thoughts and considerations of the city centre and how we get more people, you know, living in those spaces. And it feels like, again, a bit like the sort of the timing mentioned by Councillor Smith with government, that, you know, that actually coincides really nicely. So how much of a consideration will that be as one of those clusters, that there'll be, you know, one of the artistic quarters attached to that?
I think the creative cluster that's proposed for Tavistock Place, that's sort of already there, but really making that mean something. It does tie in with that student population, that proximity to the universities is really critical within that as well. And I think that the clustering is really important because it has that spillover effect for other sectors and industry as well. So having one of those clusters within, well, actually 2 of them within the city centre. So you've got the performance one around TRP, and you've got the cultural one around the box. Is intrinsically linked to the city centre development more widely, not only about what will people do when they're there, but what might be the spillover effect of creative activity happening within those spaces as well, because you've got that critical mass. They share skills, they share workforce. You know, it's one of the few sectors where there's genuinely a spillover and multiplier effect in other sectors.
I wanted to, I mean, we're going to talk about the brand work in the next bit of the session, but that's why that brand work is so important, about, you know, attracting people here in the first place and explaining to them that, you know, this is a great place to grow your business or use your skills, and creativity has really emerged as a major theme in that brand work. So I think it all ties in with that retention, recruitment, all of it. You know, we offer the whole package, and I think it's interesting the way creativity has really emerged during that brand work, but obviously we'll get onto that in a bit.
Just on the sectors, just you'll know this yourself, but so what, in economic strategy policy terms, what we generally do is identify spaces where there's natural opportunity or natural advantage, and where some sectors are just allowed to organically grow. Where you've got a sector plan, you start off with, is there a cluster? So is there a unique asset base we have? So some of those were very familiar to us, like defence. It's very, very clear, and you've got an asset base. Advanced manufacturing, which links. So I think this is a well-trodden path. So once you've got that sort of cluster, then you say, if I've got a cluster, do I have an opportunity? Do I have a USP? Do I have an advantage? And then what I think has been described by Hannah is that then you create a framework around that is a series of opportunities to grow, and it really is quite well trodden. So you need an approach to skills and skills pipeline, so that the education is in sync with the requirements. You need to you talk people on premises. You have to have a physical supply of premises. You can't wait till the businesses need them. You have to anticipate them. We've done that with, so we have Flameworks and we have Ocean Studios, for example, within our things we've done before, exactly in this space. You need access to finance. So as businesses are going to grow, there will be a point where you need to provide access to money. They'll need business support. So I think the neat thing about this is that what Hannah's presenting is a really economic approach to growing a sector. So we've done the cultural placemaking, and I think the work that's been led by lots of people in this room is create a lot of that's about the repositioning of the city and making it a place to stay. What this is about is some of the more harder end of actually more businesses, more jobs, and I think that's why the two work together beautifully well. So in terms of graduates, places to live, gig economy, this whole thing is perfect, isn't it, for a graduate? You may not have in defence, you've got these large primes, but in this ecosystem, you can work across, whether you're a freelancer or you can work in the industry. If we can create this cluster and make it Plymouth have a reputation for it, then that's the opportunity. And this is a really structured approach to that, which I think it's really first rate.
Thank you. Councillor Rainsford.
Thank you, Chair. Couple of points. The first is around clusters. I'm curious, really. You've got 2/4 Productions, largest in the city in their sphere. You've got the large subsector, which is film, video, television. But none of these clusters specifically reference that, and they're all in the south of the city. Was there any consideration about whether 2/4 could be the anchor around a similar cluster in the north of the city?
Yes, and as part of the consultation, we did speak to businesses that were already operating and why here and why there. Obviously, things are changing at 2/4, so there's a sort of context around that is a little bit unknown at the moment anyway. But the conversation there was really about, is there opportunity to create a supply chain around those businesses? And really the nature of the work that 2/4 do is that isn't the case. Their work is predominantly export rather than growing here. And their long-term strategy is not to do additional growth here. Now, that doesn't mean to say that there couldn't be additional clusters elsewhere, one of them there, or even in places that we haven't even identified yet. I think it's a transferable model that could go elsewhere. But at the moment, that wasn't seen through the conversation as a kind of viable development opportunity, which, as I say, may change, but we'll keep a watching brief on that.
Thank you for that clarification around 2/4. I mean, when I visited 2/4 many moons ago, they were bringing in a lot of students through their process and sort of bringing them on and leading them into actually forming their own companies. So there was a flow going through, but that's obviously changing, which is unfortunate, really. The second point, if I may, Chair, is following on from the question by Councillor McCarthy and Smith about the number of graduate students who go through courses in the city. Do we have any stats that we could see about how many actually remain in the city and go on to work in the city, including City College perhaps in that, as well as the 3 universities? Might be helpful to see.
Yeah, so the full report does have some of that information within it. Some of it has been quite hard to extract from the organisations, but we have presented within the overall what we have. And yes, part of the idea around the clusters is that for a lot of those students, they just simply can't visibly identify where to land. And it's really as simple as that. If you don't have a visible place that you can really identify where those opportunities are, you sort of feel a little bit left. So on a simplest level, visibly identifying clusters allows people to land somewhere. And so we do have some of those stats in the main report, but we'll make sure that that's kind of pulled out as best we can.
Thank you, and it's a really good idea, the cluster idea.
Thank you. Councillor Ricketts.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for talking about Tavistock Square Place area and the demolition, because obviously it's particularly poignant being in Drake Ward. I don't remember any sort of consultation with local people about what it would be earmarked for. I mean, obviously I was in close consultation about the demolition work, and it was a kind of a case of, we've got funding, we'll demolish it and we'll see what happens, which I'm not saying is that is logical. We'll see what the market decides, but I'd like to think that the community would be consulted. And what does it mean by live workspaces?
So, I mean, on that specific point, so you'll remember better than me, in fact, much better than me, that Tavistock Place before the box the box is orientated across the other side of the road. So it was a bit of a rat run. It didn't, it was the back of the museum. So we made that decision, whenever it was, back in 2016-17, to orientate the front into Tavistock Place. And in doing so, we pedestrianised it, and the strategy was set to kind of activate that space. You remember all that. And as part of that, we had existing buildings that had no use, which was the museum annex, and then we acquired the social club to basically protect it for the opportunity for cultural development. And when we acquired that building at the time, and that was a political decision, we made it clear that we were buying that for a future cultural use at a point in time. So in terms of your specifics, I mean, all we have done at the moment is secured some money for demolition. That money is linked to housing release funds. So it fundamentally is about bringing forward some form of accommodation in the upper floors. But the intention is that we wouldn't bring that forward unless we could find a suitable cultural use for the ground floor. But before we even get into planning, design, concept, we're starting with some initial understanding of demand in the sector. And we are at the, I think it's probably fair to say, Joanne, we're in the foothills of that. So we don't even have, final concepts that we would be consulting on yet. So of course they will be consulted through any planning process as well, through scrutiny and through those areas. But the decision has already been made to protect that for cultural activity. So the question is, that's a broad church, and what might that cultural activity look like? And at a time when you'll know, as a committee, we discussed it, that many cultural organisations are finding the cost of property, quite expensive. So whatever we do has to be sustainable. But there's some really great opportunities, particularly if we're able to structure a development that the ground floor is provided at a peppercorn rent. So therefore, those cultural activities cannot have the burden of a high rent. So, but I think we're some way off getting to that consultation phase, if I'm honest.
Supplementary. I'm happy to hear that the conversation is a good, positive one. Obviously, the big fear was it'd just be a student block put there, and I think that would be a completely missed opportunity, and would probably make a lot of people quite angry.
If you go back to the basis of the acquisition was to bring forward the cultural cluster, but clearly some form of accommodation. And when you say, I think it's live workspace. So I think the idea of, if people are going to work in a freelance capacity, and a key strategic driver of the box is to create that cultural cluster between the three institutions, the university, the art university now, and the box. But if you've got a cluster and some accommodation together, then that's quite powerful. But I think the concept that we've certainly, Joanne has articulated to us is exactly that. It's about a cultural impact that we're seeking.
Super. Thank you so much for attending today. We have the report, recommendation being to note the report, so no vote required, but certainly the report is noted. I understand, David and Jemima, you're staying for the next item. Hannah, Victoria, lovely to see you again. Thank you very much for attending. We'll just allow 30 seconds for a reshuffle. Thank you. Excellent, members. We move now to agenda item number 8, and I do appreciate this has been quite a meaty agenda today, but we are at the final point, the best bit for last. Jemima, would you like to, perhaps if everybody, David and Jemima and Victoria, you're excused from this, perhaps Paul and Amanda could introduce yourself, and then it'll be back to you, Jemima, to introduce this matter.
Button from here. That's because I need my glasses and they're on my head. You go first, Paul.
Hello everybody, I'm Professor Paul Fields-Zendax. I'm the Vice Chancellor of the Arts University in Plymouth.
And I'm Amanda Lumley and I'm CEO of Destination Plymouth, and I wear a couple of other hats because I co-chair the Great South West Tourism Partnership, and I also am the strategic lead for the Devon Local Visitor Economy Partnership. That runs off the tongue, doesn't it? So nice to see you all.
Thank you. Councillor Lang, would you like to introduce this matter?
Thank you, Chair. I've got quite long notes here, and I realise you're getting quite near the end of the meeting, so I'm just going to pick out some highlights. The Visitor Plan 2030 set a strategic direction for growth of the visitor economy and has acted as a key driver post-COVID-19 for recovery of the visitor economy in the city. The Board of Destination Plymouth has acted successfully for over 10 years as a key catalyst in this space through its wide-ranging activities and partnership working. The Visitor Plan will continue to act as a key strategy in growing and positioning the city's place brand going forwards, alongside a refreshed brand strategy for the wider city. The emerging brand strategy will amplify the good work to date and will start to position the city as somewhere to live, invest and work as well as visit. This will enhance the city's reputation, act as a catalyst for increasing and attracting talent, and provide an overall direction of travel for the city's brand messaging. In terms of the Visitor Plan recovery in the visitor economy, it's been steady post-COVID-19 and up to 2023, which is the year we have the most recent data for, which comes to us via the Cambridge Economic Impact Model. So visitor numbers were 4,332,000, which was 16% down on 2019, but visitor spend was up to £335,656,000, which is 2.6% up on 2019. GVA was 258,401,000, and employment in this area is around 6,579 jobs, which is 5% of employment, which is 2% down on 2019. Total tourism supported turnover is £474,240,000. This reflects the loss of tourism business capacity and the economic factors affecting visitor spend and frequency of visits. But despite this, Plymouth continues to perform relatively well within the South West region, and some remarkable outputs have been achieved across the different partnership teams to continue to raise the profile of the city. So there have been some really key successes in the past 12 months, and I just want to highlight a few. So events, 2024 has been another busy and successful year for events across the city. For the council and the bid teams, they've achieved fantastic results. And overall, the team delivered events that reached over 500,000 people, including the British Firework Championships, which delivered direct economic impact to Plymouth of £2.8 million. Our marketing and PR activity continues to be really, really strong. Great coverage for the city as a visitor destination, as well as a broader range of topics. The way these things are measured is in terms of opportunities to view, which is, that's a lot.
Over 1 billion.
Over 1 billion, yeah. I'm not doing very well with my figures today. So, and the total advertising value equivalent is another really key bit of data, which is £43,993,497. I think Amanda could probably tell you a bit more how that's arrived at, but that's pretty significant. Our Visit Plymouth website and social media channels saw good growth with 1.9 million page views and just under 800,000 users, and a social media audience reach of 144,021. International marketing and UK domestic trade activity this year is focused on developing relationships through existing tour operators, through our extensive trade database, and attending trade shows and events, including Britain and Ireland Marketplace and British Travel Trade Show. The city has attracted a number of notable conferences last year, including the Napoleonic Federation, Urban Design Forum, and the Marine Stewardship Council. Our cruise and marine marketing activity has been really, really positive too. 2024 has been the best season to date, with 13 ships visiting in total and over 13,000 passengers and crew. 2025 is already looking really good, with 13 booked in already, including a new addition from Norwegian Cruise Lines. And I want to take a moment to thank our cruise ambassadors, who are just incredible, and the welcome that they give our visitors is extraordinary and gets commented on, and that's, you know, all in their own time. It's a real asset for us, and so I think it's really important to say thank you to them publicly. A funding application was successfully submitted to DWP for resource as a development manager to support the sector, and that was reputed to in spring 2024. And within the first 7 months of the 18-month contract, that role is exceeding expectations of the Department for Work and Pensions contract, and has already supported 207 claimants, plus 23 non-claimants. 65 of those individuals have gone into employment, 26 into training and education, and 333 interventions underway to support individuals with multiple pre-employability support. So that's pretty significant too. The Southwest Data Hub has been really successful. £500,000 of funding was secured for that work to develop a regional data hub, and this project is being led by Destination Plymouth and Amanda, and it's now in its third year. The brand work, we're going to talk about that obviously, but we know that successful city brands market their history, quality of place, lifestyle, culture, diversity, and proactively formed partnerships between city and government in order to enhance their infrastructure and their opportunities. Recent international research by Bloom Consulting on the perception of place and destinations showed that perception affects 80% of willingness to live, work, invest or visit in a destination or a place. The same report showed that if a city improves perceptions by 1 decimal point, it would equal a 15% increase in receipts from tourism, 21% of talent attraction, and 17.5% of foreign direct investment. Perception is crucial to the growth of cities internationally. So since 2023, the following work has been undertaken to move the brand work forwards. A multi-stakeholder cross-city brand development group has been set up. Multiple workshops have been held to develop brand strategy, content and themes. An external perception research report has been completed. Engagement has taken place with multiple city stakeholders and local communities, and the high-level brand strategy and narratives have been developed in draft. So we're going to talk about what the brand strategy aims to do. It wants to enable city businesses and communities to align their efforts and resources behind a strong brand narrative and specific objectives in a way which has not been previously explored in Plymouth. The strategy will support the Growth Alliance Plymouth work by repositioning the city and attracting talent using new narratives and highlighting the unique strength and opportunities that the city offers. The board of Destination Plymouth would like to thank Babcock, Princess Yachts, University of Plymouth, the Box and Plymouth City Council for providing the funding support to enable the brand strategy to be developed. So I'd like to hand over to Paul, who's going to tell you a bit more about the brand work. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So there's a little duplication, but I think a bit more detail is useful for councillors to understand the breadth of the brand work. So I'm a member of Destination Plymouth, the board. I have taken the duty of chair of the City Brand Development Group on behalf of Destination Plymouth, really to get together stakeholders to drive a conversation about what's necessary. Just so you're aware, the membership is quite broad and diverse, and I'm going to just very quickly run through the who so you understand what has been happening over 2 years. The membership includes Babcock, Devon and Plymouth Chamber, City College Plymouth, Diversity Business Incubator, NHS Hospitals Trust, Plymouth Sound National Marine Park, Plymouth Active Leisure, Plymouth Community Homes, the University of Plymouth, Plymouth Marjon University, Arts University Plymouth, Princess Yachts, Plymouth Culture, Ocean Conservation Trust, Plymouth Manufacturing Group, Theatre Royal, The Box, Plymouth City Council, of course, and maybe some others that didn't quite make the top list. That's really important to know because it's been quite a galvanising moment for, I think, the city as a project. The brand group have been engaged with stakeholders for over 2 years. I think the first meeting was the 8th of February 2023, so there's been a really good conversation happening. We've provided local business, the local business community and also residents and students to shape the direction of travel in that discourse. And what has happened from that is a sort of galvanising of commitment to the future prosperity of Plymouth. So that's been a very, very good articulation amongst the community. Destination Plymouth have convened the group, they've led on logistics, and they've tendered successfully for, as alluded to, perception research about the city, and also a brand narrative and identity work. They've also procured a company of significance, DNCO, and another PRD. I forgot what PRD stands for. I'll come back to that in a minute. 2 organisations who are leading in their field and are producing the work that we'll currently talk about now. The initial piece of work was an external perception report. So it was an ask to say, what do we think of the city? What do others think of the city? What do stakeholders beyond the city think we are? And that fell into two camps, essentially. One was essentially trying to address a key moment for the city and its growth, which was talent attraction, and what would it take to kind of land us as the destination to come and work, live and remain. And the other was a perceptions research piece, which was trying to evaluate both the internal dialogue of the city and the external view that might be offered quite generously sometimes in the media to counterpoint that. So the talent attraction, just to give you a flavour, that evaluated the city's 4 growth sectors. It identified and attempted to identify key assets within Plymouth to establish the size of the market demand and supply in terms of jobs, to understand what might be called competitive clusters, so what other cities and regions are doing, and to consider talent attraction and retention factors, what it might take to retain high quality individuals in the city for the jobs that we have both now and in the future. It attempted to identify strengths, weaknesses and opportunities for Plymouth in that attraction and how we might retain a workforce into the future. The perceptions research was clearly an engagement project. It explored the positive and negative perceptions of the city, both as a visitor, as we've heard, and also as a worker or an employee or somebody who is resident. And it was a way of trying to understand what those perceptions were in terms of location, lifestyle, opportunities here in Plymouth and the Southwest, and to evaluate the differences between views, which were quite polarising in some of the feedback. As you would expect, there were very positive accounts of the city given by both residents, workers, employees, businesses, etc., and also some fairly negative perceptions that were aired and viewed in that context. What I think that's allowed the brand project to do is look objectively across the range of feedback and to identify where those USPs are for the city and what a brand actually needs to do and work hard to achieve. A little flavour of those sentiments were, in terms of negative perceptions, councillors will be very aware of their stereotypes. The city is just about the navy, it has no opportunities, it's far away, has no culture, which irked me somewhat, is not diverse. Some of these are well trodden. However, what we also got was a lot of very, very important counterpoints, which is critical to us developing a positive brand message. So we had an innovative city, there was career growth, lifestyle location, creativity is all around, it was an empowering community. There was a lot of very supportive commentary. And I think it was that positive messaging that we were very keen to kind of raise in the brand work. The insights really have driven opportunities around some key areas which I'd just like to define. The first one was around celebrating the ocean's all-encompassing benefits, from scientific discovery to creative inspiration, making Plymouth synonymous with a greater quality of life. That was very important. Showcasing Plymouth's employment opportunities and to narrate how innovation threads through the city's past, present and future. And also to define Plymouth's USP, what that would look like in terms of employment and gain for people who want to come and live here. So that was a really positive aspect of the work. As I say, there's been a full commitment from that brand development group, and it also gave us a little bit of headway into some of the key opportunities that were being sharpened a little bit. First of which was Plymouth's economic specialisms. So absolutely understanding that national security, defence, marine research, there are really, really key and important sectors here that needed to be highlighted. As a counterpoint, capturing the friendliness and community feel as a welcoming city. That's fundamental, I think, if we want to grow and develop. Articulating issues such as full family support to allow talent to come here and stay. What would that look like as a city? How would we, ensure that schools and offers and interests and leisure and everything maps to that offer? Proactively connecting with young talent. With these existing opportunities, and we know there are a lot of opportunities that are coming on stream. How do we do that? And also reflecting Plymouth's future story. So, a lot of investment coming into the city, public and private sector, the transformative effect, that has to flow through some kind of brand narrative. So next steps briefly are that work is informing some more defined assets, if you like. There's a creative team working with some key stakeholders, local community again, to develop what that narrative will look like based on that research, what will reflect the city's key strengths, and what the opportunities are that we all feel need to be kind of tapped into. Outcomes would be a new city brand toolkit that would allow businesses to promote the city and also kind of share that with the values of each individual business, so it's done on individualistic terms. Marketing assets, proof points, research data, so that multiple stakeholders can engage in this. We are also very keen that if this is a success, then we would aspire to have brand champions. So maybe some of the more proactive businesses or employers in the region will establish themselves as early adopters of something on a citywide basis. I think this is about the coalition of the willing. And I think the thanks have been given, but again, there is a real thanks to those funders that were mentioned, because that's driven this project. And I have to say, a very, very widespread stakeholder engagement in this. So I think that's everything from me. Thanks.
Thank you. Now, we do have a slideshow, don't we? Are you taking us through? No, they're in the papers. Okay, we have those in the papers. Thank you. Amanda, are you content that we proceed with questions, or did you want to add anything?
All I want to add is, so I've been on this journey for 2 years now, and I just wanted to say the thing that has kept me going has been some of the engagement with our local communities and businesses across the city. I sat in all the community group workshops and open sessions. And what came across for me was that, you know, we have got some very proud people in our local community, and we've got some very talented people as well, and you know, some great innovation, and that's been quite an inspiring journey. 2 years ago when we started this, we'd had the Britain's Ocean City branding for 10 years. That is going to stay. We're not getting rid of that. We're keeping that. We've been building on it for 10 years, and it's really important to the city. But what we needed to do was reflect our current position and our future position as somewhere that's going places. And, you know, the city's growing, we're evolving, and we needed to reflect that. And what was also clear when we did an initial piece of work 2 years ago was that people sort of felt a bit like they couldn't really use the city branding, and it wasn't theirs to use, and they didn't feel like they owned it. So what we've done over the last 2 years is we've sort of built a coalition of the willing, to use Paul's term. We've listened, we've reflected, we've adapted, we've got a general consensus from all of these different organisations that is the direction of travel they want to go in, and we've pulled those sort of key threads together using that research as an evidence base. So that really motivates me. I'm very sort of excited about the opportunities to take this forward into the next stage, and I hope that, you know, you will be excited too by the fact that we've got all these people who are basically saying, yes, we want to do it, when can we use it, you know, let's do this. So for me, that's been really powerful, so thank you for that.
Just to frame the session, so there's been lots of workshop sessions, lots of business sessions, but this is really your chance to make sure that this group of people haven't missed anything in that. You've seen the detailed perceptions, as you know, what been reflected back to us. So the next stage of turning that into, you know, design toolkits, narratives. So this is really important. So do, you know, if anything jars, chimes, reinforces, just take that opportunity to really give us that, and then we can take that into the next phase of work.
I'm grateful, thank you. So, Councillor Sparrston, first and foremost.
Thank you, I appreciate that. As a Buds Head councillor, it's obviously a lot of my focus is on the north. When I look through this, it talks about Babcock's, Princess Yachts, University of Plymouth, PCC, all down in the south. Apart from maybe Marjan's, 90% of the organisations mentioned were all in the south. And when we look at the Destination Plymouth board, it talks about its diversity. Richard Stevens, City Bus, Princess Yachts, the Navy, Rio, these are all kind of people from the south. When we're looking at kind of the diversity which is mentioned within this paper, can we look at maybe geographical representation? Because for myself, I don't see maybe the north being as prevalent as it could be, or maybe there could be some sort of champion in itself that could maybe be trying to highlight things in the north of the city. Thank you.
Thank you for your feedback. That's really interesting. We are continuing to explore how we evolve the Destination Plymouth Board going forwards, and diversity is something we're really interested in. So that's something that we can take away. In terms of the north of the city, thanks, that's a really helpful observation. It might be useful if you've got any examples of organisations that you feel we could engage with that we might not have engaged with. I'd be really happy to sort of follow that up with a conversation. I know there are some large manufacturers to the north of the city, and we do work very closely with Plymouth Manufacturing Group, just so you're aware. Kawasaki, obviously Lee, who chairs that, we work with them. So although they're not individually highlighted, we do work with some of those organisations, but I'd be really very happy to hear any ideas you have. Sorry, Jemima.
Thank you. Councillor Lang?
I want to add to that. In my early conversations with DNCO who've been carrying out this work, I made exactly that point. And actually in all the stuff around culture and creativity and all of it, really try to make sure that the north of the city is getting a mention. And because, when you look from outside, you look at where our major cultural institutions are and our infrastructure is, and it does, I think of it in constituencies, so it does tend to be in Sutton and Devonport as opposed to Moorview, but I know it's not for the brand, but certainly the quad at Marjon has kind of been reactivated through a partnership with Barbican Theatre. That's just started a couple of weeks ago, and I think that's going to be a really exciting partnership to see what happens there. But there's much more we must do, but just in terms of reassurance, in terms of my I was going to say nagging, that's too negative a word, but just I do try to make that point in most of the discussions I'm in, and it was certainly something I talked about with DNC, and we could go away and just get a bit more information about who they talk to community-wise, because I did raise that point with them.
Thank you. It's a very good point. I think during the research there was another dimension which was also east and west of city, and including on that axis. So I think it's a great point. We did have some conversations with, I think, Fred Thomas at one point about the same sort of representation thing. So I think it's in our minds. But again, I think it's about the coalition of the willing. I think the project was definitely about one city and having to be inclusive and finding that narrative. So I think we'll take that away.
We did engage quite heavily and do engage very heavily with the NHS Hospitals Trust. And actually, when we did our community workshops, some of the volunteers who participated were actually nominated by them from some of their what's the word I'm looking? Some of their groups, their not their consumers, their participation groups. Yeah, that's what.
Thank you. And it's right that the broader group that you set out includes the Devon and Plymouth Chamber, Plymouth Marketing and Manufacturing Group, the small FSB, which a lot of businesses come under the umbrella of those representative organisations. Councillor Lang.
I wanted to add that it's been a key focus for DNCO and everybody involved that it's not just about the businesses and the stakeholders. If our residents and our communities don't see themselves reflected in this brand, then it's not going to work. They're not going to advocate for it or be champions of it either. So I think that's why that's really is key to this work.
Thank you. Councillor McCarthy.
Thanks, Chair. Thank you all. Thanks for the presentation. I think for me, sort of Britain's Ocean City and the brand, that was a big thing about pride. And I very much take on board David's comment that, this is a really important moment. So I'm quite reassured that, from Amanda and Paul and Jemima talking today, that there's a very considered approach to this. The toolkit and being able to respond to, well, why is it
innovative or whatever it happens to be. I think that's really, really crucial. I guess my question is more simplistic though. On a very simple level, if we're talking to residents or residents are asking about this piece of brand work, you know, why is it so important to repositioning the city, you know, in a layman's sense?
I mean, just briefly, I think I would sum it up by saying, because of course, you know, people go, oh, you're spending money on this, and I get that. But successful cities have strong brands. They do, and you know the evidence is there to support that. And you know, Britain's Ocean City has been successful, and you know, and people were sceptical about that when that first emerged. And now it's, you know, it's interesting that the research has shown that that is something actually people in the city have come to love and they use it. But we need to up our game now in terms of, you know, getting people to come to the city as visitors, to live here, as we've talked about students to stay here. We need to articulate, you know, we know it because we live here. But if we don't live, I mean, I know this is probably a little bit tangential, but Come Dine With Me is from Plymouth this week. And on the first episode, one of the contestants is not a Plymouthian. And they said, oh, why are you in Plymouth? And she said, well, I Googled, you know, cities by the sea with reasonable house prices and things to do. Plymouth came up, I've moved here, I'm not going anywhere. And actually what she said was, it's not about a slower pace of life, it's about a well-being pace of life, and that's come out of this research as well. So I think it's really important to have a brand that we can all buy into and share, and that's what successful cities do. So I think that's how I would sum it up to a resident if they ask me. It's time we did this. And the way that we have worked together as a group, there's so many people have been involved, and normally, you know, that would be a kind of, I think it's fair to say, a more fractious process than it's been. It hasn't been, because again, it's a coalition of the willing who love Plymouth and want to champion Plymouth and want this kind of vehicle to help them do that.
Yeah, Amanda.
Just in layman's terms, I think, just to sort of build on what Jemima was saying there, I think there's some really important messaging here. You know, we always talk about the fact that we don't shine our light, you know, it is a very competitive market. We've got to attract 7,000 jobs over the next few years, and we're competing with cities right across the country. One of the things that came out, which is an amazing statistic, is that nearly a third of our city are active volunteers. Now, that is a statistic for me that's really worth playing back to our own community and saying, you know what, that's amazing, you're brilliant, you're really good at that. And that came through a lot of the workshops and engagement. People are really generally keen to help. And from some of the external surveys, that whole welcoming city concept came through, and that was from people who, you know, were not living here, they were external, and Plymouth was perceived as a welcoming city. And we've got other statistics around safety and a whole range of other things. And so I think it's important, and we will be looking at what I call community messaging as part of this process, to start to think about, okay, how do we play some of these back and say, actually, that's really good, you should be really proud of that, because actually you're doing much better than other places, particularly other comparator cities. And that's about building on that pride in our local community. So in layman's terms, you know, there's some really positive messages I think we can use, and that's part of our branding process.
Yes, if I may, just briefly, I think the other thing we haven't discussed is the collective voice and then the confidence that comes through the branding. I think one of the continual pieces of data, to use a phrase, was Plymouth punching above its weight. Now, collectively, we don't look at it as an aggregate. We see it as little bits here and there. There's an opportunity to put that together. If this is actually about attracting something new, as in particularly talent, then we have to do that collectively. That's probably where the brand helps. Okay.
Thank you. Now, I have three more councillors to invite in. I appreciate we've overrun, which is the chair's fault, really, so I must apologise. But if we could try and keep the questions and the responses on point, that would be helpful. Councillor Ricketts, you're next.
Thank you, Chair. Just a bit of feedback. I always think that when, interesting you said the Come Dine With Me thing, is how people talk, yeah? So I don't think we mention people enough. when people are around the dinner table, you say Plymouth's the best. It's got the best people. That doesn't ever seem to spring out on me. It's people that make a place. Just to feedback and our nighttime economy as well. That's what people talk about. Where you go out, where you have a drink, where you just some feedback because you did ask for it, David. On a more mechanics sort of note, when we're doing branding, it's a bit of a strange one. Do we have to consult like other cities? So, for instance, like we're Europe's, ocean city, yeah, brilliant, fantastic. But then you've got Portsmouth, the great waterfront city, because our second paragraph then goes into we want to be the finest waterfront city in Europe. Is there some sort of, does somebody claim the sign first? Do you know, what if Portsmouth suddenly just said their ocean city? Is there laws and technicalities on these points?
So no, there isn't particularly. There is when it comes to copywriting and trademarking. But if you claim something, as long as it is evidence-based, then you have every right to use it. And so Britain's Ocean City, that it's a clear marker, it's a global marker. We are about the ocean. There are a lot of other dimensions, but the reason we're here is because of our positioning close to the sea. That's how we've evolved over the centuries. So we've claimed that there's nobody else that can be Britain's Ocean City, it's the same with some of the points we pulled out in the research that you showed had really strong evidence points. 38% of jobs in marine industries in England are based in Plymouth. That's huge. That's something that nobody else has got. And we've got the Marine Biological Association, which is one of the oldest marine biological associations in the world and one of the leading research institutes. Nobody else has got that. So this is about making a point of difference. We are a unique city, and this is about us shouting about our uniqueness and making people who are not in the city stand up and listen and say, goodness me, I never knew that. That sounds interesting. I want to know more. And that's the only way we'll actually get them to take notice and start to attract people to come into the city.
I've got two speakers left. Jemima, could I just hold you? Is it lengthy? Because I'm conscious that I want to get everybody in. You're not just repeating what Amanda says.
I'm not repeating what Amanda said. I'm interested in your reflection. And I think maybe because we're so close to this work, and there's people on every page of the report, but I'm interested in your reflection about the lack of people. I think the volunteering thing, to me, was a real indication of our people, but maybe we need to articulate that differently. So that's an interesting reflection.
Okay, thank you. I have Councillor Rainsford. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, panel, for all you've been doing. And I remember well Peter Jones, the late Peter Jones, bringing forward proposals for Britain's Ocean City, because we didn't have a brand before then, and it has had an impact, and I do accept that we need to bring it into the 2025s or whatever. However, my question is, it's about the national restructuring of tourism, if I can take you back, and the way it's affected Plymouth's ability to draw down funding from within the wider county context. Could somebody explain exactly why that's become more difficult? How much money are we likely to use? And is there anything that we as a council can do to influence that?
So I was actually at the National Local Visitor Economy Partnership Conference yesterday in Birmingham. So over the past 2 years, tourism in this country has been restructured, and you now have effectively 3 tiers of tourism organisations. You have local visitor economy partnerships, which are county size or city sub-region size. So what's happened, for example, in Devon, is that we've come together with the 27 other tourism organisations in Devon, which includes Visit, English Riviera Company, Visit South Devon, etc., to form a voluntary alliance, which is the Devon Local Visitor Economy Partnership. So that's the sort of the second tier, if you like. The first tier, there are only 2 organisations in the country currently, and they are more pan-regional structures, so they're called Destination Development Partnerships. The first one is Newcastle, Gateshead, Durham and Northumberland footprint, and the second one is the West Midlands Growth Company footprint. Going forwards, potentially those destination development partnerships will follow mayoral strategic regional footprints. What that means is that funding will flow down from government through Visit Britain and into those destination development partnerships at regional level, and then it will potentially flow out to local visitor economy partnerships at the sort of county stroke city region level. The third tier are the others, so any other small organisations that will remain functioning that are not sort of part of those structures or are sucked into them. What that means for Plymouth is that we can't directly now go to Visit Britain or Visit England and bid into pots of funding where we would have done that previously. We have to work as a local visitor economy partnership. We have to bid in for funding, and then potentially we have to deliver right across the footprint. So that restricts our ability to potentially bid in. It may also open up opportunities longer term. So where we're leading, for example, on the Data Hub project, which is the Heart of the Southwest footprint, and we've demonstrated our considerable ability to lead regionally. That's why we're the strategic leads for Devon, because we've consistently worked as a trusted partner to deliver things. So that may open up opportunities, but at the moment there's no funding. So the comprehensive spending review is an opportunity for you all to feed in to government and say you need to fund the visitor economy, because without funding to actually make an impact and deliver things and do stuff, you know, we're sort of running on fumes a little bit, and that's the same for everywhere nationally. I think the challenge for us is that the government's industrial strategy didn't recognise the visitor economy as a growth sector. There were 4 key growth sectors. The visitor economy is referenced in terms of underpinning some of those sectors, particularly the creative digital, because they're very, very closely aligned, because most of our content is digital. And the challenge for us is to make sure that effectively the sector, which is the UK's 3rd largest export sector, and you know has thousands and thousands of jobs across the UK, is not forgotten, because at the moment it's really struggling. Our businesses are struggling, and you know we need your support to help to retain the work that we do.
So, Chair, on that, can we have a recommendation?
Finally, Councillor McLean.
Thank you, Chair. I was going to take up David's suggestion to reflect on what spoke to me as part of the rebranding exercise. So I came to Plymouth as an adult, as a relatively young person, I hope, for my career. And what I find really surprising about Plymouth is Plymouth. It's incredible. It's amazing. I feel like it's Britain's best kept secret, and part of me wants to keep that to myself. But also, the difference I've had in my work-life balance since moving to Plymouth has been undeniable. I'm going out paddleboarding after this. I'm going camping on the moors at the weekend. That's something that we really should be shouting about, the ability that we have to do that here, which feels quite unique to this place. So that the scale of the change, that increased focus on work-life balance, location and the community felt really right to me, and that's what's come out in the report, and I think that's right, and that's what I wanted to reflect back. Thank you.
Councillor Lang, I may give you the last point on this matter.
Well, one of the best things that has come out of it for me is the idea of us being between 2 national parks. You know, we're a marine park and Dartmoor National Park, and that is just such a unique, incredible selling point. So I think, yeah, I think this work is really exciting. I think it's really necessary, and I think your input has been really, really helpful. Thank you.
No. So can I just have one small, tiny? No, it's not the last one. It's just, I think one of the dilemmas we've got is, yes, we're an amazing place to live, and I'm a surfer, but we're also got some of the biggest high-tech jobs and the best high-value jobs and the best innovation and the best growth and the best ambition. And that's what we've got to mould together. So part of the issue is some of the perceptions of lag, that you can come here to have a sleep and you can come here to not have a career. And if you want to attract talent, they need to have confidence they can build a career. If they're going to bring their family down, they need a confidence. If they don't succeed in one career, they can flip to the next career. And if you look around Conurbation, Sheffield, Leeds, Manchester, that's what they have. People can build lives and careers. So if you think, we know that we've got, over the next, I think if you look 15 years, there's sort of 15,000 brand new jobs in the city, but our workforce is going to be entirely static. So it's that moulding of those two things that's critically important. So, and I think that's the beauty of this report, is it's asking us to, yes, hold on to those things, but to be absolutely proud of the opportunity, ambition. And those two things together, that's the uniqueness, I think, for what it's worth.
I'm grateful, thank you. Yes, very informative, very interesting report, and it's great to have you all here to be able to discuss that. And we've learned a tremendous amount. I've learned something. Come dine with me. I now know what it is. Thanks, Hannah.
That's all right.
Anywho, right, we have 4 recommendations before us. You've read those. I don't plan to amplify those. There is a suggestion that I think Councillor Rainsford was made, that we should perhaps invite the cabinet member to continue supporting Destination Plymouth by lobbying the government for continued funding. Would that kind of encapsulate what we were saying? Yeah? Okay, so we'll add that recommendation to the 4 that's there. So we now have 5 recommendations. So can we, those are the recommendations. We need to vote on that, don't we?
Yep.
Can we have a show of hands in support of those 5 recommendations? That's great. Thank you very much. Very supportive of what's going on, and looking forward to that continuing. Thank you very much for attending.
Were we? Oh, yeah, yeah.
I've heard of that one. Before anybody on this side of the room leaves, could we just finish the agenda? Thank you.
I was going to say, work programme. Yeah.
I would be grateful. Thank you. Thanks. Okay, so that takes, I'm sorry to be rude, but we're going to talk while you're exiting. Thank you so much. Agenda item number 9 is the work programme. You're asked to consider the work programme and discuss the work programme. Hannah, over to you and other members.
No comment, Chair. We other than we've got our last meeting in with South West Water, yeah.
Quickly on that, Councillor Sproston suggested we visited YMCA to look at. Is that something that can go into the project?
Through you, Chair. So that will be something that I'll add to the tracking decisions, and then sort that out. Similarly, last time I think Councillor Ricketts suggested that the committee did a visit to Tyneside when the opportunity arose. So I'll add that to the work programme. Yep.
Indeed, yeah.
Yep.
Thank you. Great. So that's agenda item number 9, and agenda item number 10. Again, Hannah, this is you.
Through you, Chair, you'll see a couple of the actions have been actioned, ticked off. I will let the committee know I've spoken to Anna Peachy regarding the recommendation from last time, from something that came from Councillor Ricketts during questioning for more details that makes the information about immigration and the influence on the Plymouth labour market rather than UK. So hopefully you'll get a further update about that soon.
Okay, in the absence of any raised hands, thank you so much. Today's agenda was really meaty. Thank you so much for remaining awake and involved. And I look forward to seeing you at the next one. Thank you.